The hush of autumn's last leaves whispered through the high windows of the Erie's solar, where Lady Sansa Stark contemplated a map of Westeros spread across a lone cedar table. Moonlight filtered through thin glass and caressed the inked shorelines, the mountains of the Vale, and the bold strokes that marked trade towns from Gulltown to White Harbor. Sansa's copper-red hair shimmered in the muted glow, lending her an almost ethereal presence. Yet the steel in her gray eyes belied any illusion of fragility. She no longer saw the map as the backdrop for ancient houses vying for power. Instead, she envisioned the veins of a living body, roads, rivers, ports, as vessels through which law, trade, and justice would flow, unshackled from the whims of lords and monarchs. Behind her, the shut door creaked open. The soft, calculated footfalls that followed belonged to no knight of the Vale. They carried more secrets than steel. When Sansa turned, the spymaster of bygone courts stepped into the silver light, his bald head gleaming like a sharpened orb. Lord Varys smiled, a gesture as sly as it was self-effacing, and folded his many-ringed hands before him. "My Lady of Winterfell," he purred. "Or should I say, Madam Regent? Titles shift so frequently these days, one can hardly keep abreast." Sansa answered with a wry tilt of her brow. "I am whatever Westeros needs me to be, Lord Varys. What title would secure bread for small folk this winter? What name would silence the sellswords on the Golden Bridge? Tell me, and I will wear it like armor." Varys' eyes softened as if proud. "There speaks the daughter of Eddard, yet tempered by Lannister lions and Littlefinger shadows both. You were forged in harsher fires than winter. Still, fire alone does not temper a kingdom. Ideas do. And I have brought you one." "Then no." Sansa gestured toward the map. "We speak of ideas every fortnight. Most of them lie here in ink, waiting for swords to carve them into reality. But this," Varys whispered, gliding to her side, "would mean far fewer swords." He drew a parchment from beneath his violet silks, an old, weather-stained scroll perhaps salvaged from a forgotten sept. On its face, Sansa read terse lines set in the archaic script of Andal kings, yet unmistakably Valyrian in cadence. She deciphered only fragments: consent of the governed, assembly of freeholders, lawful dismissal of tyrants. Her heart quickened. "A charter," she breathed. "Written before Aegon's conquest? Or perhaps penned by dreamers of the Dawn Age?" Varys murmured. "Regardless, it is a blueprint. One your brother Bran's ravens found in the archives of Old Town after the Citadel cleansed its dust. I retrieved it for you, my lady." He tapped a slender finger upon the parchment. "Westeros has never been so weary of crowns as it is now. Queens and lords truncated by wildfire, daggers and dragons. The realm is ripe, not for another monarch, but for a republic." Sansa recalled Tyrion Lannister's hollow jest about breaking the wheel, and Daenerys' promise, one that ended in ash and echoes upon King's Landing's ruins. She let her fingers hover over the scroll, feeling its promise hum like a trapped thunderbolt. The North would never cede its hard-won freedom. She cautioned. "Nor the Iron Islands their newfound fractious pride." "Then do not ask them to bend," Varys replied. "Invite them to build." He spoke of a unified council of representatives from each region, a senate, inspired by the ancient Rhoynar assemblies. Each great house would elect or appoint voices among commonborn and highborn alike. A high chancellor, selected by majority vote, would guide policy while vested with limited terms and impeachable standing. Atop this civic spine, a charter of rights would codify freedoms for craftsmen, small folk, and bonded workers. Lords would retain their lands, but inheritances would defer to legal codes rather than divine bloodlines. Whatever remained of absolute monarchy would evaporate, replaced by civic duty and consensus. The 7 kingdoms would become true kingdoms of their people, Varys concluded, not dens for dynasties. Sansa gazed again at the map. She pictured halls in Winterfell where millers and shepherds debated taxes. She imagined fishermen from the Shield Islands casting votes alongside knights from Tarth. Yet she also foresaw ancient lords snarling at lost privilege, Sellsword captains sworn to any crown that promised coin, and dragonseed claimants still lurking in Essos, worshipping the memory of fire and blood. I could summon banners in the north, she said, and the Vale's young Lord Arryn would follow my counsel. Yet Dorne is crowned in solitude, the Riverlands drown in debt, and the Reach still bleeds from Tarly-Tyrell feuds, convincing them all would invite daggers before ink dries. That is why we must proceed with subtlety. Varys agreed. Reform is a root that must burrow unseen before sprouting leaves. We shall start small, whispering wood small, and grow until trunks of old power crack beneath us. A gale rattled against the solar windows, reminding them both that winter's talons still grasped the peaks. Sansa's breath formed a pale mist. She looked to Varys, to the scroll, and finally to her own steady hands. Very well, she said. We'll sow this republic as one might sow winter wheat, hidden beneath frost until spring forces it into light. Let us begin. Man, no. They began in the Vale, where Sansa's Aunt Lysa's ghost still haunted corridors, but where Lord Sweetrabin's illness kept governance in others' hands. Sir Bronzion Royce, proud as polished iron, met Sansa's entreaty with flinty skepticism. Varys played his part as humble servant, offering intelligence that Maya Stone, a beloved bastard of King Robert, had secretly rallied mountain clans to guard trade paths from Myrish pirates. Sansa praised Maya's reasoning and proposed a local council of merchants, knights, and clan chiefs to coordinate valley defenses. Royce, grudgingly impressed, consented to convene the region's first military assembly. Small victories. Word of the assembly trickled down gullies, accompanied by rumors of Sansa's new charter. At first, small folk dismissed the idea as another southern scheme. But when grain tithes were reduced per the assembly's decree, funded by valley mine tariffs rather than peasant levies, the people embraced this quiet revolution as if it were braided into the Vale's moongree stone. From the Eyrie, ravens swept north to Winterfell. Sansa summoned her bannermen, those she-bears of Mormont pride, the iron-willed women of House Glover, the deep-voiced flensers of Flint's Finger. She laid Varys' scroll before them and invoked the ancient thing of the first men, the communal moots that once chose chieftains. Lyanna Mormont slammed a small fist upon Trestlewood. The North remembers, she declared, and the North decides. The charter found a second heartbeat. Beyond the neck, watchers among the Riverlands listened. Lord Edmure Tully, freed from cramped Lannister chains, returned to Riverrun and invited Sansa's envoys to speak before a gathering of millers and thatchers along the Tumblestone. They arrived bearing promises. River tolls would be slashed if merchants agreed to self-govern their trade guilds. House Tully would cede certain tax rights in exchange for elected grain commissioners. Edmure gambled on trust and signed. Each victory was small, but each stoked hearthfires of possibility. And little by little, the map upon Sansa's cedar table bloomed with colored pins marking charters ratified, councils sworn, levies replaced by tariffs, judges elected, and castles turned to civic halls. Yet for every new blossom, the roots of old power tightened underground. A raven from Casterly Rock arrived one dawn bearing the wax seal of Lord Tyrion Lannister, now hand to his brother, King Jaime, one-armed and restless upon the Iron Throne, ruling the fractured capital from hastily rebuilt spires. The letter dripped with familiar wit and warning both. Little bird no longer, yet still you fly too close to lions. If you intend to break our crowns entirely, do grant us the courtesy of telling us which sword we should fall upon. All jest aside, your reforms risk civil blood. Come to King's Landing, and we shall find a gentler path together. Remember who taught you to survive. Sansa studied the parchment by candlelight. Jaime had survived dragonfire and guilt alike. He might support civic reforms if shown they honored his newfound humility. Tyrion, ever the pragmatist, would weigh benefits. Varys insisted they go, and Sansa agreed, though she packed armor of calm resolve behind every silken dress. King's Landing was still a city of ghosts and rubble. Streets once paved with shattered bells, now hosted new shops, and orphan shelters, built atop bones. Yet the Red Keep remained a scar, blackened stones where Daenerys' dragonborn wrath had melted towers. Jaime held court in the restored Queen's ballroom, a marble-floored hall ringed by braziers. When Sansa entered, courtiers whispered. They saw not the timid girl forced to marry a king. They saw the Queen in the north striding with purpose, side by side with the realm's famed spider. Jaime rose, clad in simple sable and gold, his left hand missing and his right adorned with a fitting steel prosthesis hammered smooth. Tyrion perched at his brother's flank, wine cup in one hand and quill in the other, his mismatched eyes calculating. "Sansa," Jaime greeted, voice warm but edged. "You arrived before we even repaired the throne. Does winter hurry you so?" "Winter always hurries the north," she replied, smiling thinly. They convened a council where Varys unveiled the charter to assembled lords. Tarlys of the Reach, Martells of Sunspear, a maimed yet spirited Bronn now Lord Stokeworth, and newly minted Lord Gendry Baratheon of Storm's End. Some scoffed. Randall Tarley's nephew challenged, "Are we to kneel to farmers now?" But when the spymaster revealed accounts of Reach harvests rotting, because bandits preyed upon convoys while lords argued over tariffs, Gendry leaned forward. A road council of smiths and shipwrights could muster repairs faster than harbor taxes, he mused aloud. Tyrion's eyes glimmered. Jaime pressed his golden hand to the scroll. "Our crowns weigh heavier now that we know how easily they melt," he said quietly. "If we would keep the peace we bled for, perhaps we must share it." He asked Sansa how the North would abide by a republic. She answered, "We farmers share seed so no field starves. We hunters share venison in deep frost. A kingdom is no different." After hours of negotiation, Jaime agreed to charter a pilot assembly within King's Landing itself, elected aldermen from each district, including the slums of Flea Bottom. It was a risk. Empowering the city's rabble might rouse revolt. Yet Sansa believed the people preferred bread to blood. Varys promised spies to quell any hidden rabble-rousers hired by threatened lords. Still, danger brewed. Not all believed in parchment over power. In the shadow of the dragon pit, a conspiracy festered. Ex-gold cloaks, faith-militant zealots, and disgraced sellswords bound by the dream of a pure monarchy, where swords answered questions. They called themselves the Iron Laurels. Their leader, Sir Marlon Crane, had served Joffrey and blamed Sansa for monarchy's decline. He swore to slit Varys's throat and see Sansa's head upon a spike, symbols to frighten reformers. One night, as Sansa and Varys left a common hall where they had listened to butchers propose price caps, hooded men emerged. Steel rang and torches exploded, scattering small folk. Brienne of Tarth, Sansa's unwavering shield, intercepted the first sword, her own blade flashing beneath lamplight. She fought with grim grace, each stroke guided by vows carved in her heart. Yet the Iron Laurels were many. Crossbow bolts hissed. One grazed Sansa's arm even as Brienne shoved her behind barrels. Varys, unarmed, ducked and hurled a purse of coins to startle attackers. The coins clattered like hail. From roof edges, Arya Stark sprang like a night-winged sparrowhawk. She had trailed Sansa south after hearing rumors of danger. Needle found gaps in chainmail. Throats blossomed red. Brienne seized a fallen halberd and swept 4 men aside. The final assailant lunged for Varys, but the spider revealed a hidden stiletto and struck upward into ribs. When the fray ended, 8 Laurels lay dead, and 2 slipped away wounded, enough to carry fear to their master. The injury to Sansa's arm, though shallow, lit fury in Jaime Lannister. He ordered the city watch to root out the Laurels. Tyrion sanctioned bounties. Yet Sansa counseled restraint. Justice, not vengeance. She insisted. We prove our republic through law, not slaughter. Thus, Laurels captured alive were afforded public trials before a council of 6 tradesmen and 6 knights. King's Landing's first citizen tribunal. When verdicts of guilt came, sentences were chosen by lottery from a range codified that morning. Exile to the wall, labor rebuilding sewers, or conscription in the Royal Navy. The spectacle stunned the city. No heads rolled, no sparrows chanted. Justice felt, surprisingly, just. Months stretched. Charters were ratified in Highgarden, Sunspear, and even Pike, though the Ironborn demanded autonomy at sea. Each adoption followed a similar pattern. Assemblies granted power to levy tariffs and fund local defenses. Lords relinquished certain judicial rights in exchange for official seats in provincial senates, and small folk gained avenues to petition for redress. Varys' whispers paved each step, bribing when needed, blackmailing when desperate, but always careful not to sully the fledgling ideal. Meanwhile, Sansa traveled, her presence symbolizing northern endorsement. She sat with Dothraki freedmen tilling fields near the Blackwater. She dined with maesters in bold debate over codified law. Riverlanders hailed her as Queen of Commons, a moniker she neither encouraged nor erased. Even the Citadel bowed in subtle ways. Archmaester Ambrose introduced a new subject: civic arithmetic, the art of measuring grain yields against tithes. Apprentices recited Sansa's tariffs as case studies. Knowledge once hoarded seeped into villages via traveling scribes. Yet every lion has claws. Lord Randall Tarley's younger cousin, Sir Gunthor Tarley, returned from the Golden Company campaigns, brimming with resentment for peasant councils. He raised banners in the Reach, rallying knights who deemed the charter an affront to chivalry. He crowned himself Warden of the Harvest and vowed to march on King's Landing. In response, Jaime mustered a host, half Crownland levies, half Sellswards, yet Sansa begged parley. She rode to Bitterbridge flanked by Brienne and a contingent of Vale knights. Sir Gunthor met her beneath storm-thick skies. He accused her of stripping men of honor. She countered that honor tasted hollow in the mouths of starving peasants. She revealed ledgers proving his estates hoarded grain while nearby villages decayed. She offered amnesty if he relinquished excess stores to a local council. Gunthor sneered, until Varys emerged with ravens carrying letters from Gunthor's own sworn knights, who secretly supported the charter. Faced with betrayal, Gunthor relented, swore fealty to the People's Assembly, and surrendered his banners. His men returned home to harvest fields rather than dig graves. That victory, won without blood, became legend. Bards sang of Sansa, the peacemaker, whose words bent swords. But Sansa knew each triumph invited new shadows. Some lords lost rents, others lost feudal courts. Only a matter of time before one turned to darker alliances. Indeed, across the narrow sea, Aegon the young pretender once called Young Griff, brooded upon news of a republic supplanting his dream. In the smoky caverns of Dragonstone, where he had secured a foothold, he studied the ashes of Daenerys' promise and vowed to reclaim a crown his blood owed him. With him gathered disillusioned gold cloaks, priests whispering of regal prophecy, and sell-sales seeking pay. Rumors reached Sansa. Aegon rallied 1,000 knights, sought dragon's eggs rumored hidden beneath the Dragontide tunnels, and preached that chaos demanded a firm monarch's hand. If he raised a dragon banner, small folk might flock to the security of old myths. Sansa convened the Republican Senate, 50 representatives from 7 regions, within the torn Great Seps ruins, chosen for neutrality. Beneath arches scorched by wildfire, voices clashed. Some feared war would undo reforms. Others argued that yielding to monarchy would kill them outright. Tyrion proposed a compromise: declare Aegon eligible to run for High Chancellor under the Charter. Let him test his claim at the ballot, rather than the blade. Varys called the idea brilliant. It risked humiliating Aegon by fair contest. A raven carried the invitation to Dragonstone. No reply came. Instead, sails appeared upon Blackwater Bay, storm cloud banners dotted with 3-headed dragons. The city steeled itself. Yet Sansa, refusing despair, orchestrated the unthinkable. She rode across the Stillwater fields to meet Aegon's vanguard, bearing only a banner of the direwolf entwined with a wheat sheaf, symbol of the Republic's harvest. At dawn's first blush, she confronted Aegon's outriders. Her words, heavy with her father's integrity and Catelyn's compassion, met their swords with human truth. You wield steel for a crown that burned this city. We wield plows for children who deserve more than ruins. Then sure. When Aegon himself rode forth, tall, silver-haired, cloaked in black, Sansa lowered her hood. She offered him no knee, yet she offered him a chair at the Senate table. Come and be king, she challenged. But let your crown be forged from ballots. Her voice carried across the ranks, witnessed by farmers turned foot soldiers beside knights. Something ancient trembled. Aegon studied the city he sought. Its walls still bore scorch marks, but within rose new vineyards where ash once lay. His men whispered of councils that taxed fairly and roads free of bandits. Aegon, raised by grief to see the realm as his destiny, found that destiny rewriting itself in living color. In a breath-held moment, he dismounted, drew his sword, and plunged it into the ground between them. I will not burn what I seek to rule, he said. Let the people judge. Elections followed. Hastily printed ballots on rough-spun paper carried names: Aegon Targaryen, Tyrion Lannister, Margaery Tyrell returned from exile, and Lord Davos Seaworth. Every tavern became a polling station, every septat a debate hall. And for the first time since the long night, small folk stood beside lords in equal line. Raven far speech carried results to central tally halls. When final counts were chalked upon wooden boards, Davos Seaworth emerged as High Chancellor, beloved for rescuing starving children during the wars, trusted for his plain speech. Aegon accepted defeat with measured grace. He was appointed Admiral of the Royal Fleet, his talents redirected to defend the realm. Tyrion became Master of Coin, sworn to audit new coffers with brutal honesty. Sansa declined any office yet remained Lady Paramount of the North and Special Counselor to the Senate. A week later, beneath banners stitched with bushels and direwolves intertwined, Sansa addressed the realm from the steps of the Dragon Pit ruins. She spoke of a dream once born in starry-eyed youth. Songs of chivalry turned to screams, innocence traded for survival. She confessed her own scars, marriages forced, family slain, and declared that pain had informed purpose. Westeros is not a wheel meant to crush, she said, voice resolute against the sea wind. It is a garden tended by many hands. Its crown is not gold or iron, but hope. Across the reach, farmwives raised cups. In the vale, miners paused to listen to echoing bells of promise. On the wall, free folk lifted torches along newly built watch platforms, pledging to guard all realms, no longer subjects, but citizens. Night fell over King's Landing. The Iron Throne melted into slag and recast as plowshares now planted outside the city gates glimmered under starlight. Where once a king's seat had demanded blood to sit, now its metal tilled earth for barley and rye. Sansa Stark stood beside Varys atop the ramparts, overlooking lanterns that flickered like constellations upon the streets. The spider's voice drifted low. I have served many rulers, my lady. Each believed themselves the realm's salvation. Yet tonight I realize I served only half-truths. Freedom is no single crown, but the endless choosing of better paths. Sansa nodded, her gaze on distant torches. And those paths must be tended every day, she said. A republic lives not by parchment alone, but by vigilance. Below, children chased sparks from torchbearers, laughing beneath towers rebuilt. Merchants secured stalls without extortion. Blacksmiths hammered nails for schoolrooms instead of swords. Somewhere bard plucked new chords for a fresh anthem, neither king's march nor funeral dirge, but a melody of shared dawns. Sansa felt winter's chill recede, replaced by a steady warmth that owed nothing to dragonfire. She let herself breathe, not as queen, not as captive, but as citizen. In that breath lay the pulse of a world remade. A fragile, flickering star they would guard together. And though storms would come, though old powers would ever stalk new light, she sensed an enduring truth. Westeros had tasted the promise of its own voice, and no crown forged of fear could silence it again. The first snows of the new winter came late, drifting over King's Landing with a hush that concealed neither ruin nor rebirth. Beneath those gentle veils, the city awoke to its second year as the heart of the Westerosi Republic. Lanterns burned from dawn to dusk in the repurposed dragon pit, where the Senate met amid half-reconstructed pillars and the scent of mortar. In the vaults below, healers practiced sutures on wounded veterans free of charge, while novices from the Citadel jotted notes, marveling that politics and medicine might share a roof once blackened by dragon flame. Sansa Stark watched from a high balcony carved into the hillside behind the pit. She inhaled the ice-tinged air, feeling it sting against her cheeks, and listened to the distant murmur of debate. Each voice in that cavern, miller, maester, lord, sailor, was proof that their fragile experiment still breathed. Yet she felt unease coil beneath her ribs. Success bred complacency. Complacency lured daggers. A soft step heralded Arya, hair shorn to a windswept bob, dressed in dark leathers that blurred against shadow. She leaned on the stone rail beside her sister, eyes tracking a row of children sliding down a snow-dusted hill below. Their laughter chimed like bells. "I missed that sound," Arya said. "It's everywhere lately. Feels strange." "No. Strange can be good," Sansa answered, though her gaze lingered on a cluster of guards at the dragon pit's main gate, Republic wardens in half-plate bearing a wheat and direwolf sigil. The sight comforted her only slightly. "Peace is a blade's edge, little sister. We're still learning to balance." "Careful. That sounds like father." Arya's smile softened. "But you're right. And not all sharpened edges are obvious ones." Sansa recognized the warning. "You've found something." Arya's gaze flicked toward the Blackwater. Ships bobbed behind half-collapsed wharves, banners whipping in the cold wind. Most bore the Triskelion of Admiral Aegon Targaryen. 3 linked spirals of red, blue, and gold that symbolized unity rather than conquest. But several flew fresh-painted Kraken sigils, their decks crowded with Ironborn who had sworn to defend the capital in exchange for trade concessions. Arya nodded at them. "Someone's paid Ironborn dockhands to smuggle crates inland at night. I tracked 2 to a cellar beneath the old Street of Flower. Swords, crossbows, some queer green vials that stink like wildfire but thicker." "No." Sansa's heart kicked. "Who holds the purse strings?" "Too early to know. The Ironborn claim ignorance. They're only hauling for coin. My guess is an outer power. Maybe Volantis, maybe Bravos. Whoever it is plans to burn more than grain silos. Varys should hear this at once." "He already has," came a voice behind them. The spider's silks rustled as he approached, boots leaving precise prints in the snow. He offered Arya a respectful nod, then turned to Sansa with a parchment bearing 3 broken seals. "Proof arrived this morning," he said. Intercepted letters penned in Bravosi Low Valyrian, stamped with the sigil of the Iron Bank. Ice spread inside Sansa colder than the air. "They financed the smuggling?" "Yes, and more. Their ledgers show a debt of nearly 4 million golden dragons still owed from Robert Baratheon's reign. The bank expected the throne to repay in monarchic coin. Our Senate's first budgets allocated only a fraction. They seem prepared to enforce repayment by destabilizing our new order." Arya snorted. "They'll find rubble easier to tax than living cities." Varys' lips twitched. Foreign lenders seldom appreciate that paradox. Sansa saw the path unfold. Sabotage, panic, a loss of faith in the Senate, and a power vacuum ready for whichever claimant promised stability. "We need to expose them before the fire's lit," she said. Varys inclined his bald head. "A public trial of deceit might rally the people, yet it risks war across the narrow sea. The bank has ships, sell sails, influence in every port. Strike openly and they starve our treasuries." Sansa met Arya's steady stare. The younger Stark's eyes glittered with purpose. "Then we fight like wolves in deep snow," Arya said. "Quiet, precise. We rip out the throat before the howl begins." By midnight, a plan had coalesced. Gather proof of the bank's conspiracy, reveal it simultaneously across every corner of Westeros, and seize the contraband before it could be unleashed. To execute that order required the twin blades of Shadow and Sunlight, Arya and Davos. The High Chancellor spent mornings in the Senate, forging tariffs, and evenings wandering flea-bottom to gauge hunger with his own eyes. When Sansa and Varys presented the scrolls, Davos cursed softly. "Gold always finds a new tunnel," he said, rubbing the knuckles of his missing fingertips. "But tunnels collapse if you know where to dig." He dispatched trusted envoys, mostly former smugglers versed in harbor tongues, to gather names of ironborn captains willing to switch loyalties for a fairer share of trade. Davos promised them docking rights in White Harbor and salt pans, free of the crown's old bribes. Many agreed. Those who didn't found their rosters quietly seized by Davos' new harbor wardens. Meanwhile, Arya slipped beyond the city walls with a handful of faceless friends summoned from Braavost. They trailed coin paths to clandestine warehouses from Bitterbridge to Harrenhal. Without raising alarm, they marked each cache with chalk sigils invisible to any but their kin, a ghost's hand clutching a flame. At dawn, masked wardens descended in unison, confiscating barrels of black-green gel. The Senate announced the seizures as a success of their new provincial networks, praising local assemblies that aided the search. They never mentioned Arya. Back in the capital, Sansa arranged a Senate session under torchlight, inviting merchants, septons, even ironborn stevedores as witnesses. When the chamber hushed, Davos climbed a dais and spilled Braavosi ledgers across a wooden table. Maesters read aloud the debts, the clandestine transactions, the wildfire shipments logged as exotic oils. Gasps rippled. Senators who once doubted the Republic's scrutiny of finance now stared, chastened. Sansa locked eyes with Tyrion Lannister across the hall. As master of coin, he dissected the ledgers line by line, his quill darting like a dagger. He exposed interest piled upon interest until the original debt had swollen tenfold, a predatory spiral. Finally he looked up, voice ringing clear. "This house does not default," he declared, "but neither will it kneel to loan sharks. We shall repay legitimate principal, adjusted for lost lives and burnt fields under their hired blades. Let the Iron Bank haggle with widows if they dare." Applause thundered, echoing off stone ribs overhead. In that moment, the Senate felt unbreakable. Yet Sansa's thoughts, ever pragmatic, tallied the enemies they had just multiplied. She requested the session remain in recess, while Davos drafted an official reply for Ravens. The letter would offer partial repayment coupled with threat. Any sabotage henceforth would void all debts for eternity and see Westeros align trade with the Golden Company's rivals in Pentos. The gauntlet thrown, they braced for reprisal. Winter deepened. Ships from Braavos slowed in treacherous seas. But another storm brewed closer to home. In the Riverlands, a coalition of septons denounced the Senate's godless arrogance. They insisted that only the faith of the Seven could grant legitimacy. At their head stood Septon Arlan, a thin man with piercing blue eyes, who journeyed from River Run to King's Landing with 1,000 followers. They marched barefoot, chanting hymns older than the conquest, drawing converts village by village. Sansa met them outside the city walls, flanked by Brienne and 100 wardens. She permitted Arlan to approach alone. Snowflakes drifted between them like ashen petals. "My lady, we come in peace," Arlan said, voice seething beneath courtesy. "Yet peace requires piety. Your Senate seats heathens and women of ill repute above true-born lords. It levies coin to fund mummers and smiths, but not the repair of saps. This is blasphemy." Sansa chose calm. The Senate allocated grain for orphan septries and maester schools. "If certain seps go unfunded, speak with our auditors. We answer for every copper." Arlan's smile chilled her more than the wind. "The gods demand obedience, not ledgers. Restore the faith's old tithes, seat the High Septon as spiritual guide to the Senate, and we shall bless your republic." He paused. "Refuse, and believers will withdraw their faith, and their labor. Fields will lie fallow, for no man sows seed cursed by gods." Behind him the pilgrimage massed like a sea of tattered robes. Sansa saw faces worn by hunger, lured by promise. She spoke loud enough for them to hear. "The gods gave us minds to weigh justice. I serve them by serving the people. If you starve your own flocks, Their bones will cry to the seven louder than any tithe. Return to your septs. Keep faith alive in prayer, not extortion. We have harvests to gather. Arlen's eyes hardened. Wordless, he turned, signaled his followers. They dispersed toward inns, preaching against the Senate at every hearth. That night, 3 grain warehouses burned in King's Landing's eastern ward, bright plumes visible from the Red Keep's ruins. Investigations traced the fire to oil casks rolled from a pilgrim camp. The city panicked, fearing famine. Senate sessions dissolved into shouting matches over emergency rations. Merchants hoarded. Prices spiked. Sansa felt the Republic seemed stretch. She called an emergency council. Tyrion, Davos, Brienne, Varys, and Aegon. Arya lurked silently in a corner, eyes glittering. We must prevent hysteria, Davos said. Open the Crownland's grain reserves. Flood the markets with fair-priced bread. Do that, and we empty our stores before spring, Tyrion warned. And if the bank retaliates with trade embargoes, we choke. Aegon drummed fingers on the table. We could sail to the Arbor for surplus. The Red Wine Fleet is loyal to the Senate. A quick strike trade could fill granaries. Varys shook his head. The Arbor's yields were poor this year. Besides, pirates prowl the Straits of Tarth. Dispatching warships risks confrontation. Volantis would savor. Then? Sansa listened, weighing every risk. Then she recalled letters from the north, bumper harvests of winter barley, larders full due to mild, earlier frost. She turned to Varys. Send ravens to Winterfell. Ask Lady Lyanna Mormont to coordinate shipments down the White Knife. White Harbor's docks are clear of embargo. We pay fair price, same as any port. Tyrion nodded, relieved. Northern grain avoids Iron Bank blockade. Splendid. But while the ships sail... Sansa continued, we must still the flames of fear. If faith drives this panic, then faith must help resolve it. Then, she ordered an open forum in the Dragon Pit. Septons, Red Priests, Maesters, even a Dothraki shaman invited to speak. They would debate before thousands, not behind closed sept walls. The proposition stunned the city, but curiosity overcame suspicion. When the day came, crowds packed the arena's tiers, wrapped in furs. Septon Arlen stood at one podium, carnation robes whipped by wind. Across from him stood Melisandre of Ashai, arrived unannounced at dawn, claiming a vision of peace required her voice. Between them, Maester Samwell Tarly, now Archmaester of Civic Lore, held the moderator's bell, cheeks flushed but voice firm. Sansa watched from a balcony high above. She despised spectacle, but she sensed its power. Let the people see arguments aired, not whispered. Arlen thundered scripture. Melisandre spoke of a Lord of Light who judged deeds, not bloodlines. Samwell answered with tales of the long night's unity. Back and forth they went. No winner, no execution. By dusk, something remarkable stirred. Common folk realized dogma could share space without swords. When Sam rang the final bell, applause erupted, not for any single creed, but for the debate itself. In the weeks that followed, pilgrim fervor dwindled. Breadlines shortened as northern grain arrived. Arlen, outarged in open air, lost his thrall. His followers scattered across septs that accepted Republican stipends to feed poor. The fires ceased. But every victory carved new scars into Sansa's resolve. Nights grew sleepless. She paced ramparts above the black water, listening for enemy sails among crashing waves. Brienne urged her to rest. Sansa answered with tired smiles. The realm doesn't sleep, she said. Spring cracked winter's shell. Buds pearled on ash trees about the Red Keep's courtyards. The Senate prepared its second elections. Candidates canvassed far and wide. Lords pledging road repairs, blacksmiths promising better coinage, septas vowing orphan clinics. It felt vibrant, chaotic, alive. Then, the plague arrived. It began in Fair Isle. Fishermen offloaded a merchant cog from old Volantis whose crew coughed blood. Within a week, half the harbor town bore purple lesions. Ravens reached King's Landing trailing black ribbons, the seal for pestilence. Sansa summoned the Senate's emergency committee. Maester Samuel outlined protocols: quarantines, healer stations, ships turned away unless inspected. Yet fear again threatened reason. Dockworkers refused foreign vessels. Grain from the north risked rotting in holds. Davos proposed a bold remedy: convert the ruins of the old Dragonstone leper colony into a quarantine harbor. Ships would anchor there, crews observed for 10 days before goods cleared. It required manpower and funding. Tyrion balked, but Sansa overrode him, dipping into the Senate's burgeoning treasury drawn from trade tariffs. "Gold is no use to corpses," she said. Aegon offered his fleet to escort convoys safely past pirates. He personally commanded the Blue Talon, a sleek new flagship built in Blackwater yards. When he sailed at dawn, his banner, 3 spirals, streamed like hope across gray water. Sansa watched, heart heavy. Each friend dispatched into peril left her more alone. In the Dragon Pit's infirmary wing, Sansa visited recovering plague victims. Some were Volantene merchants, now citizens by choice, some fisherfolk of the Reach. She sat by their cots, listened to stories, mopped brows. Word spread that the Lady of Winterfell walked plague wards without retinue. It inspired others. Septons volunteered as nurses. Sellswords donated wages for medicine. Pyromancers produced disinfecting alchemical lime rather than fire. Still, the death toll climbed. Fair Isle's port lay silent, save for funeral bells. The Senate feared riots, but Sansa insisted on transparency. Broadsheets published daily numbers, infections, recoveries, losses. Never before had common folk seen truth in ink, rather than rumor. It did not quell grief, yet it built trust. After 6 harrowing weeks, Maester Sam declared the outbreak contained. The quarantine harbor proved effective. Plague never reached the capital. A Senate vote decreed the site a permanent, free port, tax-exempt for traders who met health inspections. The measure passed by overwhelming margin, cementing a new vein of commerce. That evening, in candlelit halls, Tyrion raised a goblet to Sansa. "My lady, you barter in miracles," he said. "I once believed only dragons could bend history this way." Sansa sipped watered wine, eyes drawn to the dark window. "Dragons break history," she murmured. "We're trying to sew it." Tyrion's smile faded to thoughtfulness. "Needle and thread can mend many things, but cloth thins with each tear. Remember to weave new fabric, not just patch old banners." She nodded. Later, alone, she considered his words and wrote a letter north requesting wool shipments for weaving guilds. Something new indeed. The year ripened. Markets brimmed with produce shipped along canals reopened in the Reach. Children memorized civic oaths in schools beneath repainted 7-pointed stars. The Iron Throne's plowshares reaped the first full harvest. Barley flour ground in mills that paid taxes to elected grain councils, not crown excisemen. Songs about the Republic drifted from taverns. Lyrics of dairy wolves and wheat merging, of sailors losing fear of press gang chains. Yet across the sea, storms of a different breed gathered. In Volantis, oligarchs smarted from trade losses as Bravos's gambit failed. The bank had quietly rescinded sabotage after Senate exposure, but Volantene triarchs thirsted for retribution. They hired the Red Sails, an infamous corsair fleet, promising pardons for slaving charges if they crippled Westerosi shipping. Led by Captain Valor Drohaz, known as the Bloody Tail, 20 war galleys made for the Stepstones. Word reached Aegon at sea. He dispatched falcons, swifter than ravens, bearing urgent notes. Sansa brought the Senate into emergency session again. Debate raged. Some urged arming merchantmen, others advocated appeasement by reopening slave markets to Volantis. Sansa slammed her palm on the cedar table that once held Bran's ancient charter. "No man or woman will sell flesh while this Senate stands," she said, voice hard steel. "We confront the corsairs. If we bend at sea, we bend everywhere." Aegon's fleet, 18 ships, fewer than Red Sails but sturdier, rendezvoused at Tarth. Brienne, now Lady Commander of the Sapphire Guard, pledged 2 galleys and 4 smaller longships. Sailors from the narrow sea guilds volunteered, motivated by Republic stipends that promised pension for families. Sansa could do little but wait. The wind roared through her bones as if she too crested waves. She spent nights pacing corridors, reading dispatches from harbors, meeting blacksmiths forging chain shot for ship ballistae. When she slept, dreams swirled. Dragons over water, wolves swimming. Battle came at dawn east of the narrow sea's choke point. Reports told of fog bank drifting as fleets engaged, mastheads looming like ghosts, until ballista bolts cracked hulls. Aegon's flagship Blue Talon took the vanguard, ramming Drohos's Scarlet Fang amidships. Flames erupted when volatile resin barrels exploded. Brienne's Sapphire's Oath flanked 2 corsairs, boarding in brutal melee. At midday, a thunderclap rattled the sky. Rumor claimed it was Aralor's fire called by Melisandre from King's Landing's temple, but maesters insisted it was merely powder kegs ignited. Whatever the cause, 3 red sail ships sank in flaming spray. By dusk, Drohos fled with 7 battered galleys. The rest surrendered or burned. Casualties were grievous. Blue Talon returned with scorched rigging, Aegon wounded by splinter to the thigh yet alive. The victory resounded across both continents. Volantis disavowed Drohos, feigning ignorance and dispatching diplomats to Braavos to salvage face. Trade lanes reopened. Merchants cheered. Senate coffers swelled from prize ships auctioned. Sansa welcomed Aegon upon his crutch into the dragon pit. Crowds chanted his name, yet she saw unease in his eyes. Later, in quiet chambers, he confessed. "Out there, I felt the old call," he admitted, voice hoarse. Banners snapping, men obeying without question. "I almost wished for the crown again. It frightens me." Sansa clasped his hand. "That desire is why you suit the Republic. You see the danger, and you choose restraint." She squeezed gently. "We all wrestle crowns in our hearts, Aegon." He nodded, relief shuddering through him. Years slipped like rivers under ice. Westeros knit itself together with woven roads, canals, and words. The first Southern-Northern Grain Festival in Old Town drew tents from every region. Attendees swapped seeds, songs, and legal petitions. Sansa walked among them, face uncovered, not as queen but as citizen. A Dornish girl offered her a peach pie. A reformed Ironborn pirate tipped his cap. She accepted these small courtesies as signs of something grander, belonging. But even gardens need tending. Reports of highwaymen near the neck resurfaced, men wearing tattered lion cloaks. Echoes of Casterly Rock's lost splendor. Tyrion traveled there, persuading his cousins to reinvest mining profits into public roads guarded by paid watchmen, rather than levies. He returned thinner, haunted, but triumphant. The loan he secured from Lannisport's merchant bank would fund an academy for engineering. Meanwhile, Arya's network exposed an underground ring trafficking children to Pentoshi brothels. Sansa authorized clandestine strikes. Wall after wall of privilege cracked until the ring collapsed. The rescued children found homes in new foster halls, staffed by septas and silent sisters, underwritten by Senate stipends. Yet the gods, indifferent to politics, unleashed another test. A summer storm, stronger than any since Aegon's conquest, rolled in from the Sunset Sea. Its winds shredded sails, toppled watchtowers, and inundated the coastal flatlands of the Reach. Thousands fled inland. Disease and famine loomed again. Sansa coordinated relief. Aegon's fleet ferried supplies. Brienne led engineers building dikes. Still, they required more hands. A call went out across the realm. Any citizen who assisted would earn tax credits, land grants, or Senate commendations. Volunteers poured in, freedmen from Meereen, seeking new land, wildlings eager to prove loyalty, maesters with carts of medicines. While they labored, the Senate passed the Homestead Act. Unused lordly lands damaged by storm would be granted to settlers willing to farm under local council oversight. Old lords balked. Small folk rejoiced. The rebuilding forged friendships across feuds. A Blackwood married a Bracken after erecting levees side by side. A Tyrell cousin swore fealty to a Dornish traitor whose citrus saved her from scurvy. Sansa saw that tragedy could inspire more unity than any charter. She traveled to the devastated marshes personally, boots sinking into muck as she listened to farmers' tales. Children cheered her arrival. She ate common stew, slept in canvas tents, and at dawn sang northern lullabies to calm frightened toddlers. When she departed, she left behind not coin but seeds, north-run barley hardy to salt-kissed soil. On the journey back, she paused at Moat Cailin where ancient stones loomed. Standing upon weathered battlements, she understood why her ancestors built walls, not merely to bar invaders, but to remind rulers that power stands only if foundation stands. She knelt, laid a palm on the stone, and whispered gratitude. Autumn came, bringing the Republic's 5th election. Davos declined another term, citing weary bones. Candidates rose. A blacksmith guildmaster from King's Landing named Mela Stone, a Septa scholar from Lannisport, and Aegon Targaryen himself urged by sailors to run. The campaign thrummed with speeches, songs, debates broadcast by town criers. Sansa watched from Winterfell, where she tended northern holdings and memories. She had refused nomination again, believing distance healthy. Yet one crisp night, a raven landed on her window, carrying parchment bearing 2 seals. One, a wolf-wheat sigil, the other, a rudimentary crown of rope, the emblem adopted by orphan wards of King's Landing. Inside lay a petition with 20,000 signatures, blacksmiths, fishermen, freed slaves, maesters, and orphans, requesting Sansa Stark accept candidacy for High Chancellor. They cited her leadership during plague, battles, storms. She read each scrawled name until dawn painted frost-rimmed glass. Ghosts of her girlhood whispered, fear, captivity, loss. She saw Joffrey's sneer, Ramsay's cruelty, Littlefinger's lies. Yet she also saw Father telling Brandon hold fast to honor, Mother advising compassion. By sunrise, she penned 2 letters. One to the Senate accepting nomination, not for ambition, but for duty. The second to Arya. Come south. I will need your shadow and your smile beside me. Election day dawned under clear skies. In towns, people queued at wooden booths. In ships at anchor, sailors voted by tossing carved tokens into barrels. High in the Erie, mountain clans scratched marks on slate tablets, then rolled them down, goat trails to maester convoys. No lord commanded them. They chose themselves. Ballots traveled by raven to King's Landing, where scribes tallied for days. Crowds slept in streets, waiting. Finally, Maester Sam ascended a platform before the dragon pit. He read results in measured cadence, total votes, turnout by region, invalid ballots. Suspense strangled each breath. When he reached the final tally, Sansa Stark elected High Chancellor by narrow margin over Mela Stone. Cheers erupted. Bells rang from Sept towers. Hawkers threw tarts into throngs. Sansa, just arrived by barge, found herself carried on a tide of applause to the dragon pit podium. She wore plain gray wool, trimmed with faint veil blue. No jewels, no crown. The roar dwindled into expectant hush. She searched faces, Tyrion grinning like a proud uncle, Davos clutching his cap over his heart, Aegon nodding with ease, Arya perched atop a column, a silent silhouette. Sansa spoke. I stand here not as queen nor daughter of Winterfell alone, but as one thread in a tapestry you have woven together. I pledge to guard your voices, even those that oppose me. I swear to remember that grain in a child's stomach weighs more than golds, and I promise this. Never again shall a single throne decide the fate of millions. The fate of millions will decide what thrones may stand. Her words carried across stone into open sky, where ravens wheeled like ink on parchment. Some would call her reign an era. Some would call it merely a chapter. But those who lived it felt something larger than time. A dawn where direwolves roamed fields not for war, but to remind all who sowed there that vigilance kept harvest safe. In nights that followed, Sansa often climbed the highest tower of the half-rebuilt Red Keep. From there she could see plows glittering in moonlight beyond city walls, forging furrows in soil fertilized by melted iron. She would breathe the mingled scents of sea salt, pine smoke, and bakery bread, proof that oceans, hearths, and homes fused in one heartbeat. Sometimes she sensed quiet footsteps and knew Arya stood behind her, watching the same horizon. They spoke little. Words felt heavy when silence carried memory enough. One such night, snow began to fall, tiny crystals settling on stone like dream dust. Sansa extended a hand, letting flakes melt on her palm. "It still feels delicate," she said softly, as if one storm could undo us. Arya's eyes shone in starlight. "Everything worth keeping is delicate," she replied. "We just guard it with sharp teeth." Together, they turned toward the sleeping city, its lamplights flickering like embers on fresh fallen snow. Somewhere, a distant horn sounded from the harbor. Another ship arriving, perhaps bearing spices, perhaps refugees, perhaps scholars. The Republic's pulse. Sansa closed her fingers around a snowflake that had not yet melted. The cold stung, but beneath it beat warmth. Blood, hope, will. She felt the realm's weight settle upon her shoulders, lighter than the chains she once wore, heavier than any crown she could imagine. And she welcomed it. For in that weight lay purpose, and in purpose, the promise that when the next winter came with howling winds and frozen rivers, the people of Westeros would stand together, not behind walls of birthright, but beneath banners of choice. They would argue, laugh, bleed, heal. They would falter and rise again. And each time they rose, they would do so upon foundations no monarch could break. Foundations mortared by voices, by trust, by the trembling yet unyielding certainty that a realm belongs first to its children, and only ever after to its rulers. Snow blurred tower edges into softness, and Sansa Stark, once a pawn upon a board of kings, now High Chancellor of a living republic, lifted her gaze to where dawn's first blush kissed the sea. She breathed its light into her chest, and in the hush between heartbeats, she heard the realm answer, not with cheers, nor chants, but with the quiet, resolute murmur of countless souls choosing, together, to be free. The white knife lay silent beneath its thin veil of ice, its frozen surface gleaming pale under a muted sun. On its banks, townspeople hauled timbers and quarried stone, erecting granaries that would one day feed half the realm. Above them, banners depicting entwined direwolf and wheat stalks fluttered stiffly. Sansa Stark stood atop a scaffold beside Lady Lyanna Mormont, overseeing the final beams set into place. The younger woman barked orders with a ferocity that belied her size, her voice cutting through the cold like a silver axe. When at last the keystones locked, Sansa exhaled, feeling the promise of surplus settle over the north like a warm mantle. "Another step, my lady," Lyanna said, wiping snow from her brow. "Come spring, these stores will see every hearth fed, even in Deepwood." Sansa smiled. "And once the rails from White Harbor reach here, Riverlanders will taste northern bread by summer." She paced to the scaffold's edge and gazed south. The hypothetical rail lines, a dream first sketched by Tyrion and perfected by maester engineers, would braid the kingdom with iron arteries. Today they existed only on parchment and in the tinkering minds of blacksmiths who had begun crafting prototypes of steam hammers. Yet Sansa could already sense the rumble of their engines. A raven swooped onto a high post, talons gripping ice-slick wood. The bird's parchment bore the twin seals of Davos and Aegon. Sansa untied it, scanning quickly. The letters delivered tidings both hopeful and ominous. Brienne's Sapphire Guard had completed the coastal forts along the Reach, but Corsair survivors had rallied in Lys, swelling to 100 ships under Drohaz, now styling himself Prince of the Basilisks. Worse, rumors persisted that Volantis financed his resurgence, funneling slaves and powder, disguised in casks of olives. The Senate would convene in 3 weeks to debate measures. Davos urged speed. Aegon urged caution until his flagship's repairs finished. Sansa refolded the letter and tucked it into her fur. Lyanna, summon your best riders, she said. We leave at dawn for White Harbor, then sail. The Senate cannot wait. Lyanna lifted her chin. The North rides behind you. She called for horses at once. That night, Sansa retired to her chamber in Winterfell, but sleep eluded her. She drifted along the godswood paths, snow crunching underfoot, until she stood before the heart tree's weeping face. Crimson sap glistened like dried blood against alabaster bark. She knelt. Father. I bear a crown of rope, not iron. Yet it tightens with each crisis. Grant me your calm. She closed her eyes, hearing wind through dead branches, and for an instant felt the earth itself answer with a low pulse. When she rose, resolve radiated from her bones. She would face the Senate with the North steel. Weeks later, King's Landing greeted her arrival with a cacophony of hammers, saws, and distant gull cries. The rail foundries on Rhaenys' Hill belched steam that hovered above rooftops. Fishmongers hawked northern cod beside Dornish figs. Porters in blue and orange chits stamped with the Senate's crest unloaded bales of wool from White Harbor and barrels of summer wine from Dorne. The city felt robust, humming with enterprise. Yet beneath that hum tremored fear of Drohos's fleet. Sansa strode through the Dragon Pit's gates into the Senate chamber. The tiered arena swarmed with voices. Reach delegates demanded subsidies for shipwrights. Ironborn envoys called for letters of marque, and our lord priest pressed for lighthouse beacons to be lit in perpetual flame. Archmaester Sam hammered a bell, yet clamor continued. On the central dais, Tyrion watched with narrowed eyes, quill poised like a poised crossbow. When Sansa mounted the dais beside him, the uproar softened. She rested gloved hands on the stone rail. Scanning faces, she saw skepticism, pride, ambition, fear, reflections of her own soul. She spoke. Friends of Westeros, crisis does not beckon despair. It beckons invention. The Corsair Prince of the Basilisks threatens not only trade, but the liberty of every soul upon our coasts. I propose we meet Seafire with ingenuity, not empire. Let us craft a navy of the realm, funded by tariffs, crewed by volunteers from every province, its command rotated by Senate vote. She paused, allowing the notion to settle. No single house shall own this fleet. Its flag will bear no lion, trout, or dragon. Only the wheat and the wolf, symbols of harvest and vigilance. Murmurs rippled, turning to waves. Lord Randall's nephew Gunthor, now seated respectfully after his earlier capitulation, raised a hand. What of expense? Shipyard strain already. Dothraki horse traders beg timber for wagons. The treasury will empty, Tyrion answered, voice crisp. Beg. The treasury has doubled since the free port opened, and I have secured a commercial loan from the Iron Bank itself, at modest terms, leveraged by toll bonds on the Northern Rail. A hush swept the pit. Yes. The bank returns. Tails between legs. The message, stability, is profitable. A Dornish woman in silk and sand-colored mail rose. And if Drohos sinks our investment before the rails repay? Sansa gestured toward a raised platform where maesters unveiled a scale model of a ship. Sleek hull, broad deck gun placements, an unfamiliar chimney stalk. Steam, she said. Engineers in Old Town have harnessed fired water to drive pistons. These war cutters need no wind. They will outmaneuver any cog propelled by oar. Samwell stepped forward, reciting specifications. Coal bunkers under deck, ironclad plating at waterline, pivot cannons fed by belt-driven winches. The Senate gaped. Arguments ensued. Cost, feasibility, where to mine coal, how to train stokers. Sansa listened, moderating with calm nods, weaving compromise. The Vale would supply ore, the North timber, the Reach hemp for rigging, Dorne citrus for scurvy. Each province gained stake. The vote stretched until moonrise. When the final tally rang, the Republic Fleet Act passed by 7 votes. Relief surged through Sansa's veins, but caution tempered it. The blueprint was only ink. She now must craft steel. Construction began in Shipbreaker's Bay, where brackish tides served as testing ground. Blacksmiths hammered iron plates. Masons laid dry docks of quarried granite. Maesters calibrated boilers. Amid sparks and shouts, Sansa walked catwalks with soot on her cheeks. She learned the smell of coal dust, the rhythm of riveting hammers, the clank of chain hoists. Workers found her presence heartening. She found their frank curses humbling. Across the city, Aegon drilled volunteers in a repurposed tourney field. Sailors accustomed to rigging learned engine gauges. Land knights learned deck gunnery. The training fostered camaraderie that transcended banner lines. Still, not all believed. The faith militant muttered that unnatural fire repelled the Seven's blessings. Some nobles feared devaluation of their private warships. Sansa responded by inviting every skeptic to witness the first steam trial. On a raw February dawn, the prototype, christened River's Promise, slid into gray water on greased beams. Smoke puffed from its funnel. Engines throbbed like a waking giant. The vessel carved a crescent wake, pivoted with startling agility, and accelerated, outrunning a gull flock. Cheers cracked the air. The faith militant's high septon swallowed his protests. Even the ironborn pilot whistled admiration. Over the next months, 4 hulls grew on the slips, each improved by lessons from the previous. Tyrion juggled copper orders. Sam supervised stoker health. Brienne tested boarding ramps with armored units. Progress felt feverish. Sansa lost track of days until Arya appeared one night on her worktable, dangling her legs. "Your eyes are rimmed red," Arya said softly. "Even wolves must close them." Sansa smiled, rubbing temples streaked with charcoal. "I sail in calculations even when I sleep." Arya held up a leather pouch. Storm's End citrus candies. Stolen by legitimate authority. She placed one on her sister's tongue, its tart sweetness brightening the dim hold. Brienne reports rumors. Drohaz is courting Carthene cell sorcerers. They promise war gulls, alchemic kites carrying fire pots. Sansa's shoulders tensed. Then our fleet must depart before his magic takes wing. They agreed. Launch within 2 moons, though only 3 ships were near completion. Better a swift strike than a delayed armada. Launch day arrived swathed in slate sky. Crowds pressed onto piers, flags and prayer ribbons rippling. Sansa boarded Northwind, her command flagship, beside Aegon, Brienne, and an ironborn woman named Captain Arla Quellon, chosen to navigate shoals. Each vessel's deck hosted representatives from every province: Dornish archers, Vale ballista crews, northern engineers, stoking boilers. Sailors sang a new anthem forged from tavern chords. "We haul no chains. Our hull bears bread. On storm or flame, the people lead ahead." Cannons fired salute as they cleared the harbor. The steam engines chuffed steady, their vibrations coursing through the planks like a powerful heartbeat. Sansa stood at the prow, watching the coastline recede, then turned her gaze east to the horizon where Drohaz lurked. 3 days out, gales battered the squadron near the stepstones. Yet steam cutters sliced through crosswinds that would have stalled sail-driven ships. On the 4th dawn, Arla shouted from the crow's nest. "Sails ahead, black cloth with crimson serpent tails." Drohaz.I. The pirate fleet stretched across the channel, a wall of 30 galleys. Drohaz's flagship, Queen's Leech, bristled with scorpion bolts and hanging braziers for wildfire bombs. Scarlet pennants whipped amid chanting drums. Battle stations manned. Sansa felt unreal calm descend, an echo of her father's poise. She ordered signal flags. Wedge formation, flank left, hold range for pivot guns. Aegon repeated commands from Sparrow's wing to starboard. Brienne's iron vow swept to port, ready to board at need. Drohaz fired first. Scorpion bolts streaking. Armor plates rang. One bolt pierced Northwind's smokestack, spewing sparks. Engineers doused the blaze and patched the pipe with iron clamps. Steam hissed, but engines held. Sansa assessed distances. Fire! Cannons roared, chain shot tore into a galley's oars, snapping them like twigs. Water churned. North wind veered, presenting minimal broadside, then accelerated beyond the crippled hull. Sparrow's wing matched her, delivering volley after volley. Pirate crews screamed as deck guns shredded planks. But Drohaz released his war gulls, kite-like frames soaked in pitch, trailing ember ropes. Winds lofted them above the cutters. Alchemic vials dangled. Sansa's pulse thumped. "Archers," she called. Veil longbowmen loosed flights of flaming arrows. Kites burst, raining sparks on pirates more than cutters. Some vials shattered prematurely, igniting Drohoz's own forecastles. Queen's Leech lurched amid green flames. Yet one kite survived, crashing onto iron vow. Wildfire spilled across Brienne's deck. She rallied crew to smother flames with sand and tarps. A boom erupted. Mast shuddered but held. Brienne pressed on. Sansa ordered Northwind to close with Queen's Leech. At 50 yards, pivot guns blasted chain grapnels, embedding in the pirates' railing. Steam winches reeled hulls together. Boarding ramps slammed across. Brienne, soot-streaked yet unbowed, led the charge from Iron Vow's opposite flank. Aegon swung in from Sparrow's wing. 3 fronts converged. On Queen's Leech's quarterdeck, Drohaz swung a curved saber, eyes blazing manic joy. He dueled with Aegon, whose thigh wound still stiffened, but whose skill shone. Sparks flew as steel rang. Brienne engaged Drohoz's first mate, while Sansa directed gunners to seize powder holds. Blood-slicked planks. Amid chaos, a pirate lunged for Sansa. She blocked with a short northern blade gifted by Arya, Valyrian steel etched with snowflakes. She slashed once. The pirate fell. Her breath steamed ragged, but focus sharpened. A roar drew her gaze. Drohaz disarmed Aegon, slashing his arm, then kicked him toward the rail. Brienne screamed, dashing forward, but was blocked. Sansa moved, too far. Then another figure appeared. Arya, emerging from smoke like vengeance. Needle flashed. Drohaz staggered, surprise widening his eyes. Aegon thrust a hidden dagger up through Drohoz's queer ass. Blood sprayed. The pirate prince collapsed. Saber clanging to deck. A hush rippled. Pirate resistance faltered. Flags fell. Men surrendered. Fires were quenched. The sea accepted sinking hulls as offerings. Survivors were bound. Sansa surveyed the carnage. Casualties heavy but fewer than feared. She felt neither triumph nor sorrow, only exhaustion, and the dull echo of necessity. Aegon leaned on Brienne, bleeding freely. "Did we break his tail?" he wheezed. Sansa clasped his shoulder. "We broke the threat." She turned to the horizon where dawn rose pink. "Now we build something better." The squadron returned home, trailing captured ships. At Dragonstone's harbor, thousands lined quays to greet them. Banners of the Wheat Wolf flag mixed with local sigils. When Sansa disembarked, cheers thundered, but she raised a hand for silence. "This victory is no crown," she said, voice echoing across water. "It is a foundation. The days of private fleets fighting private wars end here. From this hour, every mast that sails in defense of Westeros will rise under the Republic's flag, under the will of its people, not the whim of its nobles." The proclamation seeded a new institution, the People's Navy. A winter later, shipyards in Duskendale and Lannisport laid keels under standardized plans. Coal mines in the Vale deepened, and alchemists refined smokeless powder. The industrial heartbeat quickened. Yet whispers of discontent slithered through high halls. Certain lords grumbled that steam cutters eroded their prestige. Faith elders claimed the engines belched heresy. Iron Bank agents visited counting houses, wary of investments overshadowed by public credit. Sansa anticipated these shadows. She scheduled open inspections of naval budgets, invited septons to bless furnaces, lured bankers with guaranteed dividend shares on freight routes. Many objections dulled under sunlight. 2 years slid by, and the rails at last reached the white knife. Iron locomotives, painted blue-gray with direwolf insignia, steamed south carrying grain, timber, and travelers. A journey that once cost a fortnight by wagon now spanned 3 days. At each station, small markets sprouted. The realm's arteries pumped. One crisp autumn, Sansa visited the Reach terminus at Highgarden Junction, where vineyards sprawled and windmills turned lazily. She walked platforms with Lady Mellistone, now Minister of Labor, listening to complaints about wages and wobbly track joints. They resolved disputes on the spot, signing decrees for additional safety guilds. As dusk settled, Sansa wandered alone through the castle's rose gardens. Aroma of late blossoms mingled with distant steam whistles. She wondered if her father had ever envisioned such transformation. She felt a pang. He had loved order yet would have marveled at these disruptive engines. Footsteps across gravel heralded Varys. He bowed slightly. "My lady, a raven from Bravos." He offered a sealed scroll. She opened it. The Iron Bank proposed a 10-year bond to finance expansion into Westerosi markets, citing mutual prosperity. Sansa smiled faintly. The tide turns. Varys' gaze lingered on her face. Success invites complacency. And old powers adapt. Already whispers speak of merchant princes plotting stock manipulations to gain leverage over the Senate. Sansa inhaled rose scent. "We will regulate exchanges. Transparency is our shield." He nodded but did not smile. Yet transparency exposes hearts as well as ledgers. Are you prepared for the day the people scrutinize you with same ferocity? She considered. If they find fault, then I will answer. That is the bargain. Varys bowed again. And why you endure where others fell. Winter's cloak descended once more, though milder than those of her childhood. In the lantern-lit library of the restored Red Keep, now a public archive, Sansa pored over drafts for a constitution. Senators argued for codifying limits on terms, enshrining provincial rights, enumerating protections for freedmen. Tyrion insisted on a bill of commerce. Sam championed a universal literacy mandate. A group of Dornish and Reachwomen drafted clauses on bodily autonomy for marriage and inheritance. The document spanned dozens of scrolls. Each line weighed blood and ink. Sansa scheduled a constitutional convention at Harrenhal, symbolic site of former tyranny. Preparations began. Repairs to the Great Hall, lodgings for hundreds of delegates, galleys to ferry them. Sansa yearned for eventual adoption, the Republic's heart carved in law. Yet across Blackwater Bay, in the still-battered slums of King's Landing's East Quarter, a shoemaker named Olwen Sand nursed quieter dreams. She had lost 2 brothers to Corsair raids before Northwind's victory, yet daily she paid coppers toward a brick tenement whose rent soared with newfound prosperity. One bitter evening, her landlord, an ambitious wine importer, tripled the monthly fee. Olwen and her neighbors petitioned city aldermen. Hearings stagnated. In desperation, Olwen wrote directly to the High Chancellor, and never expecting reply. Sansa read her letter past midnight. Olwen spoke of growth enriching merchants yet pushing laborers onto streets, of steam engines thundering while children starved in alleys. "We helped build your rail," she wrote. "But the rail rolls over us." The words pierced. Sansa realized that prosperity's coin had 2 faces. She summoned Davos, Mellistone, and city aldermen. They debated rent caps, public housing, tax incentives for landlord compliance. But bureaucracy crept. Proposals tangled in committees. Olwen's plight spread via broadsheet prints, igniting marches beneath banners reading People's Roof before People's Rail. Crowds gathered outside the Dragon Pit, chanting politely yet insistently. Sansa stood on the steps listening. No violence erupted. Only voices, raw and determined. She invited representatives into chambers, accelerated legislation, diverted grain tariff surpluses to affordable housing. Within a month, brick tenements rose under Senate oversight. Olwen received keys to a room overlooking the Blackwater. She wept on its threshold. Sansa attended the opening ceremony. Reporters asked if such bold social spending risked insolvency. She answered simply, "A house stands on pillars. Commerce is one. Justice is the other. Remove either, the roof collapses." The Republic took note. As the Harrenhal convention approached, Arya's network detected a ripple of intrigue. Former Faith militant zealots plotting assassination. They sought to exploit the congregation of delegates, planning to collapse the castle's refurbished gallery during Sansa's speech. Arya uncovered caches of blasting powder disguised as limestone. She intercepted coded messages that referenced Judgment of 7 by stone and flame. She showed her findings to Sansa the night before departure. Pages stained with soot told of a zealot named Brother Harlan. Sansa's jaw tightened. We cannot cancel. That's CD's victory. Instead, she doubled security, disguised structural supports as decorative arches, and invited Harlan himself to present grievances on convention floor, knowing the offer might unsettle him more than any sword. At dawn, long banners hung from Harrenhal's grim towers, colors bright against black rock. Delegates arrived by barge and coach. The great hall, once seat of Harren's cruelty, thrummed with anticipation. Sansa opened proceedings. On her left sat Samwell with quills and ink. On her right, Mellistone wielded a gavel shaped like a wheat sheaf. Midway through debates on Senate reapportionment, Brother Harlan's name rang through. He stepped forward wearing simple robes, eyes blazing fanatic fire. Delegates murmured. Harlan began. The 7 see vanity in these walls. Steam devils churn while souls rot. The gods mandate divine hierarchy. Before he could finish, Sansa rose and motioned for quiet. Brother Harlan, she said gently, the Senate hears your conviction, yet hierarchy has delivered only ashes. Show us scripture that forbids compassion, and we shall weigh it. Harlan faltered. He had braced for condemnation, not invitation. He produced a worn septon scroll. Samwell reviewed it, traced annotations proving the ancient text advocated care of orphans and strangers. Sam highlighted a line, make no idols of crowns forged in blood. Gasps flared. Harlan realized his own proof undermined monarchy, not the republic. His rant collapsed into silence. Guards escorted him out. The powder caches, long diffused by Arya's team, were retrieved and displayed as evidence of the threat averted by reason. The convention concluded after 2 weeks of fervent debate. Signatures in crimson ink sealed the Charter of Harrenhal. Bicameral legislature merging Senate and an Assembly of Commons, rotating High Chancellor terms, codified rights to shelter, trade, worship, speech, and justice. Ratification required each province's council, but momentum surged. As scrolls departed via Raven, a wax seal cracked over White Harbor. Lady Lyanna read the charter aloud before her clan chiefs. They roared approval. In Dorne, Princess Arianne, now Republic ambassador, embraced the document, adding a Dornish appendix of equal inheritance for all genders. Even the Iron Islands, skeptical, saw opportunity for maritime autonomy and signed. On the day the last parchment returned, confirming ratification, bells pealed from every sept and lighthouse. Sansa stood again upon the steps of the Dragon Pit, reading the official proclamation. Fireworks, courtesy of pyromancers under strict safety ordinances, painted the sky. The Republic was no longer experiment. It was law. Tyrion approached, eyes moist. We did it, little bird. Memories fluttered between them. King's Landing in smoke, chambers of terror, cups of poison. They clasped hands, wordless. Aegon, scar healed to a pale slash, lifted a child onto his shoulders, an orphan from the war, so she could glimpse the fireworks. Brienne and Mella stood side by side, contentment softening their edges. Arya vanished into the crowd, satisfied. Sansa raised her gaze. Among bursting colors she envisioned her family. Father's patient eyes, mother's steadfast grace, Robb's protective warmth, Bran's curious wonder, Rickon's wild laugh. She felt their absence keenly, yet felt their legacies woven into every word of the charter. Night deepened, Lanterns glowed. Distant locomotive whistles carried across calm water, echoing like heralds of tomorrow. Sansa retreated to her study. She lit a small lamp and opened a blank journal. Upon its first page she wrote, "The realm breathes. Now we must teach it to sing." She paused, then added, "And remember the quiet between heartbeats, lest thunder blind our ears." She closed the book, set quill aside, and at last allowed weariness to claim her. Years stretched into a tapestry of mundane miracles. Grain silos filled, literacy rates doubled. Once withered villages sprouted civic theaters. The People's Navy patrolled trade lanes, frightening off slavers whose markets found fewer buyers where literacy walked. The rail network extended to Sunspear, where children chased locomotives like steel dragons halted for water. Elections cycled. A Dornish vintner succeeded Sansa as High Chancellor, then a Maester lawmaker, then a former slave turned harbor master. Each transition peaceful, each policy contested but resolved in chambers rather than on battlefields. Sansa, freed from office, returned to Winterfell, though she spent half her time journeying as envoy for cultural exchange. In Old Town she lectured on northern medicine. In the Vale, she oversaw mountain pass hospitals. In Dorne she brokered water rights between rival vassals. One spring she visited Pike, where Lady Alanese Greyjoy had invited her to witness the launch of the Iron Islands' first steam trawler fleet. Ironborn now traded cod and ore lawfully, profits funding schools. She stood by the sea and watched those trawlers cut waves, remembering Theon and all broken things made whole. In quiet months, Sansa wrote memoirs for the public archive, stories of corridors lit by fear, of kindness exchanged in whispers, of how one can bake lemon cakes from bitter harvest. She donated profits to widows of wars. She also planted apple orchards beyond Winterfell's walls, grafting seedlings from the Reach. Each year she sent crates of fruit south, symbolic of provinces feeding each other. One autumn morning, Brienne arrived at Winterfell with news. Bran, now beyond titles, had warged into ravens and glimpsed distant Essos trouble. New slaver coalitions circumventing the People's Navy by overland routes, north of Korth. The Senate would need strategy. Sansa sighed, donned her cloak, and readied to ride south again. Old fires never fully died. Before departing, she visited the family crypt. Candles flickered across stone effigies. She paused before her father's statue, tracing worn features. "I leave again," she whispered, "but not for crowns or vengeance. Only to keep safe the children who know no thrones." "Dan?" Wind rustled through the passage like a benediction. Sansa smiled softly. She turned, footsteps echoing. Outside, snowfall began anew, blanketing paths. She inhaled crisp air and walked on, beyond Winterfell's gatehouse, toward roads that had once been perilous, but now shone with lantern posts spaced every mile, built by communal labor to guide travelers at night. A wagon passed, driven by a farmer singing a tavern ditty. He recognized her and tipped his cap. But she returned the gesture, warmed by familiarity. Far ahead, a rail whistle sounded, promising swift passage south. She quickened her pace. The realm she helped birth was no paradise. Storms brewed, greed lingered, prejudice found new masks. But she had learned that a republic is not a destination. It is a perpetually tilled field. Seeds must be sown each season, weeds uprooted, soil turned. Hands bleed, backs ache, yet harvests come. Sansa believed in harvests. She climbed aboard the waiting locomotive, settled into a wooden seat beside a grandmother and her grandson, bound for King's Landing's University. Steam hissed. Wheels churned. As the train gathered speed, the north's snowy plains unfolded outside. She watched birch groves blur, rivers glint, small villages with lantern-lit platforms fade into distance. In her lap lay maps for new schools in Essos, sketches for maritime treaties, letters from Arya describing adventures in the Jade Sea. Her future brimmed with tasks she had not yet imagined, burdens she would share with others willing. The engine roared. The track stretched like a silver thread into twilight. Sansa Stark closed her eyes briefly, feeling motion carry her forward. When she opened them, twilight had deepened, but torches along the rails flickered to life. Each one a promise that light, once lit, could leap mile to mile, heart to heart, and never be quenched so long as someone, anyone, believed it worth shielding from the dark. Steam shivered through the brass seams of the firebox, and midnight blue smoke plumed beneath the glass-paned roof of King's Landing South Station. The locomotive hissed, iron lungs cooling, as Sansa stepped down with a dozen fellow travelers. She paused on the platform, absorbing the murmur of a city that pulsed like a living forge. Whistles, shouted manifests, sparks where lamplighters touched torches to new-built rail-side lanterns. A carved cedar sign overhead welcomed guests in common, Giscari and Brevosi, gates of the Republic. 5 years earlier the phrase would have sounded like treason. Tonight it sounded like heartbeat. Brienne met her with a quick embrace, chainmail beneath a plain cloak, sword worn but polished. "You rode straight through," she said. "Arya sent word from the docks. She's gathering for the Westerosi voyage. The Senate convenes at dawn." Sansa nodded. No rest then. She kept pace as Brienne's long strides carried them toward the waiting carriage, wheels trimmed in new-minted copper. Outside the station walls, banners of every province flapped beneath moonlight. Street lamps, alchemical arcs fueled by whale oil and mirrored glass, cast luminous fans across Avenue Stone. King's Landing had become a city of light, yet in those pools of brightness Sansa could almost taste darker undercurrents. Profiteers muttering over lost slaver tariffs, priests hissing that iron beasts poisoned the air, spies counting blades for nobles nostalgic for a simpler tyranny. Inside the carriage she poured warm tea from a copper kettle, a recent Reach import, spiced with Dornish lemon, and unfurled Bran's letter. Raven ink scratched across Stark-stamped parchment. Whispers crossed the dust road to Korth. Slave caravans rerouted by night, avoiding the people's navy. Quarthine merchant houses sheltered the trade. I've seen men in iron collars driven north of the bones. Worse, I have seen shadows wearing our own banners, rogues forging Republic sigils to mask black markets. The weft phrase. "Hold the line, sister." The weft phrase, she repeated silently. All cloth thins when stretched across too many looms. 5 provinces, 10 million souls, 40 languages, iron rails, coal furnaces, paper bills, progress cut grooves that greed could follow. The Senate assembled as dawn bruised the horizon. The dragon pit's high shell now housed semicircular tiers of cedar benches, and a glazed roof that admitted pale sun. Delegates clutched steaming mugs, shaking off travel fatigue. Murals of the long night and the field of fire wreathed the walls, visions of doom overcome by unity. In the well of the chamber stood a bronze globe etched with rail lines and sea routes. The world as newly imagined. The silence that settled when Sansa entered felt dense as snow clouds. She addressed them without gong or gavel. Our charter thrived upon transparency and trust. But shadows lengthen beyond our shores. Bran's ravens confirm that Korth's 13 have resurrected slave caravans along the dust road. If the Republic claims to strangle chains at sea, yet allows them to slither by land, our oath rings hollow. Nenarwind. A hum of disquiet. Lord Gunthor Tarly, once her adversary, now master of agriculture, rose. "We cannot police all Essos. Our coffers would bleed dry." Tyrion, ink-smudged and sharp-eyed, countered, "Coffers refill. Souls do not. Yet a direct land war courts folly. We need commerce to leverage conscience." Davos, older, beard-streaked silver, though still plain of speech, leaned forward. "Pluck their gold root. Thou'll choke. Korth craves spiced grain and salted cod more than shackled flesh. A blockade. Strict, but bloodless, might bend them." Mellistone, Minister of Labor, frowned. "Blockade punishes hungry small folk first. We must pair the stick with a ladder. offer honest trade routes, promise harbor rights in free port to any Carthene guild that denounces slavers. Debate whirled. Sansa listened, weighing. At last she lifted hand. We sail not as conquerors, but as witnesses. We will dispatch an envoy fleet, 1 war cutter for escort, 3 relief caravels packed with northern grain and Dornish glass, a delegation bearing treaties. I will lead it. Then Temne gasps. E. Brienne's blue eyes flashed alarm. Arya, in the gallery rafters, boots dangling, offered a thin grin approving risk. The vote passed, narrow but firm. Preparations unfurled in a blur. Manifests signed, holds loaded with wheat, casks of arbor wine, bales of fine wool. Carpenters fitted compartments for rescued slaves, should rescue prove necessary. Aegon limped aboard the Sparrow's wing to command the escort cutter, despite protests from healers. His old leg wound flared in cold. He smiled wryly at Sansa. A dragon's fire seldom quits the bones. Northwind, refitted since the Basilisk campaign, glittered with fresh brass and a hull band of Valyrian steel salvaged from broken swords, reforged as emblem. Iron turned from death to defense. On the quarterdeck, Sansa unfurled the wheat wool flag, and harbor bells tolled as mooring ropes were cast. They steamed south, hugging stepstone channels where watchtowers now flew the Navy's twin anchor sigil. Seagulls wheeled over wakes, churned by paddle wheels. Nights on deck were bright with star flares and the mirrored glow of alchemical lamps. Arya prowled, rigging like a cat, confiding in Sansa over mugs of spiced ale. Qarth's gates are marble, but their alley shadows drown children, she said. I hear talk of the pureborn courting Volantine triarchs, coin thicker than Cahoric steel. Sansa polished telescope brass with a cloth. Then we pierce the purse before we bleed the throat. At Sunspear, they took on desert guides and casks of date syrup, sweet gift for foreign tongues. The Dornish queen mother met them barefoot on the sand, pressing a carved bone compass into Sansa's palm. Follow truth, she said, even when the needle shakes. Sandwinds flogged their sails as they rounded the broken arm and made for the summer sea. 3 days later, horizon haze resolved into serpentine walls of Qarth. From afar, the city looked sculpted of sunlight and thrumming silk. Copper-crowned towers stabbed the sky. Harbor quays bristled with junks, gullas, and yellow-sailed pleasure barges. Yet nearer, Sansa smelled rot behind the cinnamon spice. Brine, sweat, and the coppery tang of fear. Dockmasters in peacock capes greeted Northwind with oily smiles, praising the great civility of Westeros. They charged exorbitant docking fees. Tyrion paid in copper stags to flaunt the realm's minted abundance. When customs agents boarded, their ledgers shook to see cargo labeled gifts, no tariff. They stamped clearances and bowed. Delegates lodged in the Hall of 1,000 Thrones, crystal pillars, mosaic floors. Each envoy was assigned an interpreting courtesan. Robes translucent, eyes downcast. Sansa walked among gilt braziers, scanning for collars on necks. None, which told her little. Qarth's cruelty preferred subtlety. That evening, a banquet. Spiced locusts, jade-colored wine, candied scorpions. The 13 sat on crescent thrones behind low jade tables. Izaro Dixon Daxos, older, cheeks padded by luxury, welcomed them as sisters and brothers of a glorious dawn of trade. Words oily, but he spoke the common tongue for courtesy. Sansa replied in faultless Carthene, honed from weeks of study. She offered carved hardwood boxes containing gilded copies of the Charter of Harrenhal, then scrolls pledging grain shipments at fair rates, iron for silk, conditional upon Cortha's abandonment of slave trafficking. Applause polite, eyes calculating. After toasts, Zaro guided her along balconies, overlooking moonlit canals. Perfumed air masked sewage stink. Lady of the North, he cooed, Qarth honors liberty. Yet markets, like gardens, need pruning. Some weeds root deep. She halted. Children in chains are not weeds. End the trade or forfeit our ports. His smile cracked. Qarth cannot be commanded by barbarians in steam coffins. Qarth can be left to famine. She motioned to a starveling beggar girl on a bridge below. Your merchants stock saffron, yet your gutters starve. Choose. His gaze chilled. They parted with brittle bows. That night, Arya slipped through shuttered corridors. Silk slippers hid near silent steps until she reached a marble storage hall behind the peacock throne. Within, crates stamped with twin moons, the insignia of the Pal Bok, a desert caravan guild blacklisted by Pentos for slaving. Iron collar shackles nestled beneath tent bolts, disguised as hinges. She left chalk arrows for Sansa's dawn inspection. At sunrise, Sansa confronted the 13 with the evidence. Gasps. Outrage. Some feigned, some not. Xaro denied knowledge, blamed rogue merchants. But one pureborn magistrate, his conscience pricked, confessed dock bribes. The scandal poured into bazaars by noon. Common folk, long taxed for slave caravans they never saw profits from, rioted. Grain boats anchored in the harbor, unfurled banners, reading bread for all. Sailors slashed slave coffles waiting in hidden basements, freeing hundreds. The freed, hungry and desperate, surged behind Sansa's envoy column, chanting in a babel of tongues. Xaro's guards blocked the spice gate with pikes. Aegon advanced Northwind's cannons into the canal mouth, iron-fold turrets glinting. Tyrion broadcast a missive across loudhailers, an Westerosi invention, promising free bread to any who peacefully exited the city. The standoff teetered on a knife. Then a bell tolled. The pureborn sensing prophet dethroned Xaro in emergency session and capitulated. They signed Sansa's treaty, accepted tariffs, and condemned the slave guild publicly. Dock fees were halved, slaves released, caravans dismantled. It felt like victory, yet smoke still curled where riot fires smoldered. Sansa spent 3 weeks rebuilding trust. She organized volunteer kitchens, paying beggars to bake bread from their grain stores. She met with desert caravan chiefs at the charcoal gates, offering contracts transporting salt and obsidian instead of flesh. Some balked, but enough agreed. Coin spoke. She drafted passage warrants, signed scrolls guaranteeing navy escort from Qarth to Tarth, if caravan manifests remained open to inspection. The idea sparked transparency as currency. Brienne trained a city ward from freedmen, teaching shield walls in dusty squares. Arya, disguised as a tea peddler, rooted out remaining slaver pits, handing culprits over to nascent courts. Each small act wove fresh threads of order. On the final evening, the beggar girl from the bridge, named Yara, approached Sansa with a bundle of jasmine blossoms. To remember Qarth fair, she whispered. Sansa tucked a blossom into her braid. The return voyage proved less tranquil. South of Valyria's smoking ruins, the fleet encountered a flotilla of Lyseni war prides, mercenary corsairs, under orders from Volantis to seize Republic ships. Battle flared beneath red sails, dragon-shaped prows, vomiting catapults of burning tar. Yet Northwind and Sparrow's Wing executed a daring pincer. Steam thrusters pivoted mid-broadside. Chain-shot shredded jaws. Aegon harpooned the Lyseni flagship's powder magazine.I. The detonation painted sky hell orange, but allied hulls escaped. Survivors plucked from charred wrecks told of Volantene Triarch's rage at Qarth's capitulation, their vow to extinguish the Wheat Wolf heresy. Sansa penciled the threat beside Bran's phrase, the Weft phrase. At Driftmark, they rendezvoused with Davos scouts, reports of shadowy brokers buying up port storage in Gulltown, seeking to corner grain shipments and incite price spikes. Greed again, domestic this time. Tyrion dispatched inspectors with authority to seize hoarded stock under wartime powers. The brokers folded quickly, losing only coin, not heads. Still, Sansa noted how profiteers used crises to gouge. When the fleet steamed into Blackwater Bay, citizens lined quays to cheer liberated Qarthine freedfolk who crowded Northwind's decks. Bells pealed. Harbor cranes unfurled banners stitched by orphans. Chains broken, roads open. But beyond the jubilation, Sansa saw Davos waiting, brows knit. He handed her a fresh raven. It bore Bran's seal once more, dark wings, dark words. North of Korth, in the hinterland steppe, scouts glimpsed a coalition of tribes, Khalasar remnants, Rhoynar exiles, and Sarnori brigands, circling newly shackled captives. Across the ruins of Sarnath, they erected red silk tents, emblazoned with the sigil of the Golden Company. Though reports insisted the sellswords remained in Tyrosh. Someone used the famed Blackfire emblem as mask. The message ended. Smoke rises where we doused flame. Sansa felt tired weights settle between her shoulder blades. She turned to the throng greeting freed Qartheen children with sweet cakes. Victories bloomed, yet weeds grew taller. She requested a private council in the refurbished small council tower, now Senate War Office. Attending: Tyrion, Davos, Brienne, Aegon, Arya, Maester Sam, Melastone. The issue: expand naval patrols across Summersea and up Basilisk Isles, or negotiate with Volantis first. Tyrion favored shrewd trade sanctions. Davos insisted on fortified convoys. Brienne pushed for land alliance with Dothraki Khalasars, opposed to slavery. Aegon argued to preempt Volantene fleets at source, citing dragons of old. But there were no dragons, only iron boilers and will. Sansa listened, sipped cold water, eyes closed. At length she spoke. Every time we slash one head, two sprout. Because the root remains. Profit in flesh. Scarcity exploited. Ignorance weaponized. The Republic cannot chase every raid across two continents. We must craft a contagion stronger than greed, opportunity. Menderawal. She outlined a bold plan. The Open Hand Initiative. Establish a chain of free ports along Essos' southern rim. Tarth, the Summer Isles, Korth, and even Volantis if they relented. Each offering tax breaks, protection by People's Navy, and guaranteed grain imports on condition of outlawing slave traffic. Local traders would gain greater net profit via legitimate markets than via illicit chains. Over time, the black trade would strangle under its own risk premium. Tyrion's eyes glittered. Turn their greed against itself. Astute. Then? Davos tapped weathered fingers. We'll need gold. Much gold. Melastone smiled. Labor unions pledge wage skimming for freedom funds. Miners of the Vale agree. And we can mint bonds pegged to canal toll revenue. Sam cautioned. Education essential. Freed men need literacy or else slip again into debt bondage. Sansa nodded. We craft schools on every port quay, and we send our brightest teachers, not our dullest administrators. Brienne volunteered to escort the first joint envoy to the Summer Isles. Aegon requested permission to recruit Taroshi shipwrights for additional cutters. Arya, perched on windowsill, silhouetted by sunset, grinned wide. I'll scout the steppe coalition, a wolf among horses. Sansa met her sister's gaze. Worry tried to surface. Trust pushed it down. Return whole, she whispered. Arya winked and was gone before night fell. Moon phases came and went like stitches. Open hand ports sprouted cranes, warehouses, lighthouses burning green-tinted safety lanterns, distinct from wildfire. The People's Navy expanded to 26 steam cutters and 8 armored frigates. Volantis, seeing traffic reroute, entered negotiations. Triarch Malakwa Rhaegar, seeking grain credits in exchange for incremental emancipation. Sansa demanded bolder timelines. Talks stalled, but war drums quieted. In King's Landing, freed Qartheen artisans infused markets with glassblowing and silk dyes. They formed a guild, electing Yara, the bridge girl, as junior delegate. She spoke before Senate committees in Broken Common, advocating for translation schools. Funds approved within a month. Tyrion remarked privately that Sansa's empire of empathy grew faster than any army. But not all hearts shifted. Late, one summer dusk, robed shadows ignited coal tar casks beneath the Valley Rail Bridge outside Old Town, collapsing a span and killing 40 passengers. A parchment nailed to the charred timbers bore the sigil of a hawk gripping chains, the emblem of the so-called True Blood League, a clandestine circle of highborn lords, appalled by serf rebellion. Investigation traced funding to 3 minor houses whose fortunes had plummeted with the new tax laws. The Senate authorized regional councils to try conspirators publicly. 2 confessed and were exiled to the wall. The 3rd took poison. The trial, broadcast by print sheet, hardened public resolve. Terror could not kill rails. Yet Sansa sat awake that night, candles guttering. Each body weighed. Bran's phrase haunted her. The Weft phrase. Ties between provinces held, but threads strained. Culture outpaced tradition. Progress outpaced patience. She penned a letter to Bran. Tell me how to weave stronger. His raven returned after a week, landing upon her study's sill beneath a dawn storm. Inside, simple lines. Roots anchor earth. Plant stories, not just rails. Hold fairs. Sing songs, weaving north and south. Or the cloth will tear. Stories. She had governed, negotiated, fought, but perhaps neglected the soul. She summoned bards from White Harbor, dancers from Dorne, smiths from the Reach, silent sisters with chants, maesters with histories. She proposed a grand confluence, a festival traveling by rail, stopping in each province, exchanging craft, music, tales. The Senate saw no harm, approved modest funds. None guessed the power. The confluence began in Gulltown during spring thaw. Market squares burst with color. Puppeteers reenacted the charter signing. Dothraki horse masters raced Vale Mountain steeds. Ironborn skalds sang of storms broken by steam. Children tasted Dornish dates for first time. Old knights tasted fermented goat yogurt from court. Sansa attended incognito at times, watching faces bloom with curiosity where suspicion once festered. She kept Bran's letter against her heart. As the festival snaked south, Arya returned, dust-cloaked, eyes bright. She spoke of the steppe coalition fracturing, some tribes accepting open-hand contracts, ferrying goods between ports. Yet one warband remained, the Sarn Viper host, led by a masked rider called the Scythe. They flew the Blackfire sigil, but whispers suggested Volantene coin. They enslaved captured villagers to build a wooden fort at the ruins of Sarnath. Sansa's council met again. Debates ended when Aegon smashed fist on map. Send me, he said. The steppe knows horse and fire. I will carry wheat, not swords. But if swords are drawn, I will answer. Brienne insisted on joining. Arya refused to be left behind. Sansa wanted to protest but knew their skills. She consented under one condition: diplomacy first. Northwind and 3 supply wagons departed from Korth, following the river Skahazadon upstream. They carried sacks of barley, casks of water, scrolls promising fair trade. Dothraki scouts under banner of Red Lamb escorted them, honor-bound by old debt to Brienne's mercy after a past skirmish. Weeks later a raven arrived, treaty struck. The Scythe unmasked, revealed as a Volantene noble bastard, using Blackfire lure. He challenged Aegon to single combat. Aegon refused, offered bread and shelter for captured slaves instead. Humiliated, the Scythe's own men turned on him. Host dissolved, captives freed. War avoided. Sansa read the message on the diamond bridge over the Blackwater. Soft. Sunset, painting stone crimson. She allowed herself a tear of relief, then laughed aloud at how rarely swords now solved what bread could mend. 10 years after the first charter, Westeros celebrated Day of Reunion. At Winterfell's rebuilt courtyard, once a place of grief, hundreds gathered from both continents under banners woven of every sigil interlocked. Snowflakes drifted, harmless, for forges of camaraderie outshone cold. Children raced sleds while ironborn fishermen taught Qartheen girls how to carve waterfowl whistles. Maester Sam, now Archshaller, recited literacy statistics. 80% over 10, quadruple earlier heiress. Tyrion toasted with northern ale to the delightful demise of ignorance. Davos led a candlelit vigil for souls still unfree beyond their shores, reminding festival-goers work endured. Sansa stood on the ramparts with Bran, older, serene, eyes pale as frost. "Tell me, little brother," she asked, "does the weft still fray?" He smiled. "Threads always strain. That is their purpose, to bear weight. But you have braided new ones faster than old tear. The cloth holds." Below, Arya sparred playfully with Brienne near a ring of cheering youngsters. Aegon conversed with a Summer Islander admiral about ship hull curvature. Melistone taught dwarven children to count using carved direwolves. Yara read Carthene poetry in faltering Northman cadence. The crowd applauded, though they understood only warmth of intent. Sansa closed her eyes. Inhales tasted of pine, peat, distant cinnamon from Carthene mulled wine stands. She felt the realm's pulse, imperfect, unstoppable. She knew storms would rise anew. Ambition storms, fears storms, storms of simple mischance. But foundations stood. Not castles or crowns, but relationships, pacts, shared myths. She whispered a promise to the heart tree across still air. "We will keep telling stories. We will plant them until roots twine beneath every road and rail." The weeping red leaves rustled, a sound like gentle applause. Nightfall ushered swirling lights, green alchemical comets, safe and steady, painting snow with emerald fire. Children gasped, adults cheered. Music soared, a new symphony blending Dornish drums, Vale lutes, Carthene reed flutes, the low horn of the north. As notes wove, people clasped hands, strangers no more. Sansa watched from the rampart while flakes dissolved on her lashes. Her breath steamed. She realized she could step back, allow others to steer, because the dream no longer dwelled solely in her chest. It lived in each torch, each loaf, each song. She descended the stairs into the milling crowd. Soft boots crunched snow. No one bowed. She wore no insignia tonight, only a gray wool cloak. She found an open space beside a brazier, warmed hands, and began to hum along with the music, first quietly, then bold. A little boy tugged her sleeve, proffering a wooden toy wolf painted green. "For luck, lady," he said. She knelt, accepted the gift, and smiled at eyes bright as spring. "Thank you," she whispered. "Guard it well, it guards you back." He scampered off. She rose, turning slowly, taking in the tableau. Lanterns strung like golden constellations, steam from hot cider stalls curling upward, laughter crackling brighter than any pyre. She pressed the toy wolf to her heart and understood with a calm fierceness that the Republic's greatest shield was neither navy nor rail nor charter paragraphs. It was this: knights where common and noble, old foe, and new kin, stood shoulder to shoulder beneath cold stars, and believed beyond fear in the simple "I." Somewhere deep in the crowd, bards began the ballad of the broken wheel, chronicling days when thrones melted into plowshares. Voices joined, first dozens, then hundreds, chorus blending accents and ages until the song washed across ramparts, deep into the timbered hills. The sound lifted, rose high enough to brush the moons, and perhaps to drift across the narrow sea, whispering to broken chains and hidden hearts that a different world waited. Sansa sang too, clear and steady. She felt her father's spirit, her mother's, Rob's, gentle as snowfall. She felt every vanished friend, every mended foe. And in that chorus there was no single heroine, no lone savior, only a tapestry of voices, each thread bright, each thread necessary. Beyond the walls, wolves howled, not in menace, but as if lending harmony. She raised her face to the sky, eyes shining, and for the first time since girlhood she let joy wholly eclipse vigilance. Tomorrow would bring toil and compromise, quills and ship manifests, debates and another frayed edge to stitch. Tonight, the cloth held. Tonight, the realm sang. Far south, in some forgotten desert caravanserai, a slaver might still barter flesh, and far north a specter of winter might stir. But across the land between, lantern light rippled like dawn. the slow human dawn of a republic learning, faltering, rising, forever unfinished, forever striving. In that incompletion lay its beauty, for anything perfect is brittle. The republic lived precisely because it admitted its own imperfection, and kept its eyes upon a horizon, always receding, urging feet onward. Sansa Stark breathed, and in that breath felt the garden she and countless others had planted, no longer seeds under frost, but seedlings reaching for summer. She exhaled, voice mingling with thousands, and the night answered back with promise, not peace eternal, but possibility unbroken. And possibility, she knew, was the most enduring crown any people could ever place upon themselves. The chill wind coming off the shivering sea snapped the flags atop Hardhome's half-rebuilt palisades, carrying with it a smell of brine, pine resin, and distant wood smoke from the free folks' sprawling hearths below. It had taken 15 years for the fishing village once given over to ghosts to become the northernmost port of the Westerosi Republic. Even so, Sansa Stark could still sense the place's old sorrow in the crunch of the pebbled strand and the hush of rag-clad cairns where nameless bones lay. She moved past them respectfully, cloak creaking under a rime of salt, until she reached a makeshift jetty where figures waited beside a black hull newly frozen into the tide. The ship's name, Ice Dawnbreaker, was stenciled in pale blue across its prow. Its steam stack stood dormant now, but flecks of soot on ivory deckboards spoke to a hard voyage. At the foot of the gangplank, Melisandre of Ashai drew back her red hood and bowed with a curious, almost wry flourish. Time had silvered the priestess's hair and softened her once regal spine, yet the ruby at her throat still pulsed warm as blood. "My Lady Chancellor Emerita," she greeted, voice huskier than Sansa remembered. Or should one say Orchard Mistress of Winterfell? Ravens are never clear on honorifics. Sansa returned the bow more stiffly than she once might have, knees protesting after a moon of wagon travel from Winterfell to Castle Black, and then by sledge barge over sea ice. "Friend is all I ask," she answered. "If rumors are true, we have little use for titles." Behind Melisandre a second figure emerged, tall and gaunt beneath a weather-beaten cloak trimmed in shaggy direwolf fur. Bran used no chair tonight, though the cane clutched in his mechanical hand hinted at lingering pain. When he lifted his gaze, grays tinged with storm cloud heliotrope, Sansa felt again that subtle displacement, the sense of vast winged things stirring behind her brother's eyes. He spoke before she could. "The true North wakes," he murmured, "and we must choose what tale to tell it when it knocks on our gates." Melisandre gestured toward the gangplank. Inside, the fires kept low, more for omen than warmth, you'll see. Sansa followed them up, boots scraping frost. The Dawnbreaker's long common hold had been gutted, benches replaced with a shallow pit of charcoal fed by driftwood. Around it sat 8 representatives clad in fur and mismatched bits of steel. Their tattoos, blue spirals, jagged horns, marked them free-folk thanes, chieftains who had guided scattered clans all the way from then to the northernmost fjords. Near them lounged 2 hulking giants, faces crisscrossed with soot markings. Their amber eyes regarded Sansa with what looked like quiet amusement. She nodded in greeting. A stout woman named Mother Fen broke the silence first, speaking the heavy dialect of the haunted forest. "Kneel not, Wolf Queen. We heard your rail thunder years ago. Now your torchlights glare off our snows so bright a snow bear can't find midden to root. We know what price this brightness asks." Sansa sat on a barrel that served as stool. She folded back her hood. "No price," she said. "But knowledge. Our ravens carry troubling signs, fish migrations shifting, spring melt pouring from the true ice farther north, even krakens nosing shoals they never approached. Bran sees patterns. The maesters call it climate wrench. I think of it as the world breathing harshly, as though it has taken ill. Memrendem Shao." An older thane, cragged as driftwood, spat into the fire pit. "You want the old stories, white shadows and heart-tree tears." "Yes," Bran answered, voice mild yet echoing beyond the hull. "Their lore, and yours. What stirs beneath the sorrow fields may not be White Walkers, but it is kin enough. If wind howls wrong, the wall of water that rings the shivering sea could drive south and drown every harbor from Eastwatch to Korth's new quays. Bam! Sansa opened her satchel, produced 6 small glass spheres the Korthine freedman had begun crafting. Dove eggs filled with miniature spindles. She shook one gently. Tiny flakes whirled, shaping a storm within. Snow globes, she explained. A child's toy, yet each holds weather-wrought pressure. Leave one exposed, and the shape of its swirl changes with the air's anger. In the far north they spin too fiercely. The maesters fear that means the polar currents, once shackled by ice, are losing their chains. And now, the free folk listened, leaning closer, nostrils flaring over flame bitter with pine pitch. One giant huffed, sending sparks upward like fireflies. Mother Fen scratched her jaw. You on watchtowers again. Horns to sound if the freeze breaks. I want alliance, Sansa corrected. Not guards atop a wall that no longer exists, but stewards who walk into wild places and measure what the land whispers. A giant rumbled what passed for speech. Giant sea mountains melt. Rocks bleed water. Mammoth herds thin. Is this the breath you fear? Sansa met his amber gaze. Exactly this. The oldest Thane, Grey Eel Thor, shifted his scars beneath a sealskin mantle. The price, he repeated, less as question than test. We open the Republic's charter to the far north, Sansa said. Each clan chooses a voice for the Senate of Commons. Rail will reach the Frostfang foothills within 3 years. You'll have seed grants for glasshouse crops, salt credits, smith apprenticeships in White Harbor. But we ask that your lorekeepers walk with our climate scholars, record ice shelf movements, water salinity, fault rumblings. What you see, we heed. Then, a silence followed, broken only by the hum of a distant boiler, keeping the Dawnbreaker's gears from seizing in the freeze. Then Bran removed a rolled parchment, sketched maps of northern archipelagos, scribbled runes marking volcanic rifts, drawn largely from his Raven warg flights. He spread them on the deck. This is only guess, he said. You know these shores better. Fill what is blank. We will name these lines for those who drew them. Then, the Thanes traded looks. Finally, Mother Fen touched the parchment with a rough fingertip. You'll need better ink, she growled, but her mouth quirked into what might have been humor. Our winter dye won't wash in snowdrift. The agreement coalesced before dawn. When Sansa stepped off the gangplank, first light-limbed glacier faces a distant silver. She inhaled brackish air and felt tension ease from her shoulders. It was a beginning, the only kind of victory she had come to trust. By the time a raven bore word of Hardhome's pact to King's Landing, the capital's festival quarter had already erupted into uproar, though not over climate news. A scandal born of ink and ledgers gripped the Commons Assembly. A consortium of river merchants, flush with canal profits, had secretly lobbied to privatize sections of the Flower Line rail connecting Highgarden Junction to Lannisport. They planned to introduce tiered fares, effectively pricing out small farmers who relied on post-dusk freight rates to reach coastal markets. Flyers denouncing the scheme plastered tavern doors. Apprentices marched, banging spoons on cheap bronze pans. Nella Stone, now Speaker of the Commons, summoned emergency audit tribunals. Tyrion, from the Master of Coin's high perch, had smelled irregularities weeks earlier. Rat lines of gold draining from grain subsidies into a shell company, bearing a sigil suspiciously resembling House Redwine's twin grapes. But it was Davos Seaworth's foster daughter, Salator's once cabin girl turned shipping accountant, who produced the evidence. Manifests doctored, tithes underreported, a scheme timed for harvest season, when poor tenant farmers could least afford freight hikes. Within a fortnight, the Senate's Ethics Committee, chaired by Yara of Korth, held public hearings in the marble-floored Dockwright Hall. Scribes transcribed every accusation, every stout denial. Thousands pressed into balconies, jaws hard with anger. The accused barons attempted to smear the investigation as northern meddling, claiming the scheme had been greenlit by Subclause 70 of the Transit Charter. Tyrion rebutted by reading the exact clause. It forbade any tariff that burdens the common carriage of essential sustenance. The final straw was not a speech but a single figure stepping to the dais. Old Lord Randall Tarley, long retired, joints knotted by gout, hair bone white. He had fought Sansa's reforms once, yet time and observation had altered him. Eyes filmed with age, he declared the Baron's ploy dishonorable to every bannerman who had died feeding armies in the War of the Five Kings. He slammed his cane and demanded they surrender charters. Gasps rippled. Guilt was palpable. Under threat of asset seizure, the barons capitulated. Their controlling shares were redistributed into regional cooperatives, where farmers held majority vote. The crisis ended not with a sword's flash, but with an old soldier's shaming glare, and the Senate's mechanism of enfranchisement proving more potent than fear. Yet Sansa, reading the dispatch at her desk in Winterfell, felt only uneasy relief. Every success revealed new crevices where power hid. She dipped quill, pen to Tyrion. We patch holes in hull faster than we chart waters. How long till we run out of pitch? Perhaps it is time to teach more hands to build, not merely mend. Consider scholarships for canal clerk daughters, stevedore sons, to study statecraft in the Citadel Annex. Below, she added Bran's phrase again. The weft phrase, if only few know the weave. The next spring, storms unheard of in living memory rolled off the sunset sea. Gales uprooted arbor vines, shattered Velman watchtowers, and flung salt spray against the wall's phantom outline. In Old Town, the high tower's beacon went dark for 2 hours, when lightning split its bronze mirror. Birds flew inland, disoriented. Fisheries emptied. Ships staggered into ports with rigging slashed by waves as tall as the sept of Baelor's vanished spire. In the Senate chamber, Sansa laid Hardhome's ice dyer's charts beside Maester barograph curls. Lines matched. The polar thaw was accelerating. Aegon requested permission to outfit a blue water expedition to the lands of always winter, searching for the rumored calving shelf, whose collapse might unleash those tempest birth pangs. Omens aside, they needed measurement. Brienne volunteered to command the overland component. Sled caravans ferrying coal and wind turbine parts for a signal tower network that could warn ships of rogue bergs. Arya, smiling with that restless spark, swore to map paths across crevasse fields no cart had touched. Sansa did not block them, though each consent felt like gifting her ribs to butcher's blade. Duty before comfort, Bran's missives reminded her. Night after signing the expedition writ, she walked Winterfell's orchard rows, blossoms fragrant under twilight. She recalled her mother guiding her through these same trees, teaching pruning. Where you cut, new growth could flourish, but cut too much and branch starved. She asked the gods would. Are we cutting too much of ourselves to feed this realm? A raven answered with soft wing beats but no word. A moon later, as the Dawnrunner expedition angled around Skagos' jagged horns, a smaller drama unfolded in the streets of White Harbor. A fishwife named Etta Orland survived a burst boiler on a smuggling scow, illegal lantern oil bound for Volantis. White Harbor surgeons saved her, but left her with only one arm and no livelihood. Local council offered an annuity paid by hazardous cargo penalties. Yet a magistrate, newly appointed by a Lannister-backed shipping guild, stalled the payout, citing bureaucratic backlog. Word spread, inciting dock laborers to seize harbor cranes and threaten to dump imported silks into the bay. Sansa diverted her return from the Wall to White Harbor. She arrived to find the port blockaded by 1,000 Union badges. Instead of armsmen, she had traveled with only 3 aides and a satchel of legal scrolls. She walked alone through the picket line, ignoring curses hurled at the magistrate's office, rising brick-proud by the quayside. Inside, she faced the young magistrate, Kevin Hill, third cousin of Lannister stock, behind a desk piled high with ledgers he plainly hadn't read. She set Etta's claim, already notarized by 3 healers, before him. You have 6 days backlog, no more, she said. An able clerk clears 10 pages an hour. You had time to add gilt trim to your mirror but not sign 1 sheet. Nemsa. Kevin's jaw flexed. I follow procedure. The Senate's own statutes. She placed Bran's map of melting fjords atop the ledger. Statutes evolve when the sea eats them. You delay a woman's bread while our shores drown. He flushed, eyes darting to uniformed house guards posted near the doorway. Sansa ignored them. I will sit outside in the corridor, she said. I will read each file as you sign. I'll answer questions. The dockmen will be told their petitions move. If you balk, I open your books and show the Senate which shipping guild funds the delay. Ender one. Eb. The measure worked. By dusk, claims processed, cranes returned to work, silks saved. Etta Orland's stipend came with retroactive pay and a promise of prosthetic forging lessons in the capital's new craft school. The crisis died small but memorable. Folk told tales of the wolf lady who toppled a gold lion bureaucrat with a single scroll. 3 winters later found her aboard a narrow skiff on a lake of glassy meltwater. Far beyond the wall's vanished trace, beneath an aurora swirling jade and violet like the breath of some dreamt dragon. Aegon stood at the prow, frost glittering in his beard, spyglass fixed on a distant ridge. Brienne manned the tiller, arm muscles corded under polar fur. Arya perched on the stern rail, eyes scanning for crevices. They reached a shelf where spires of ice cracked with echoing groans. Bran's ravens had sighted fissures here shaped like a spiral of 9 arms, a pattern too deliberate for mere freeze-thaw. Some whispered of children of the forest, still haunting the hidden north. Sansa half hoped to catch glimpse of such myth, half dreaded what ancient grief might accompany it. They disembarked. Snow-muffled crunch of boots. Lanterns cast halos. The spiral loomed carved into the shelf's exposed face, each arm tall as a hold-fast tower tip. In its heart, a hollow yawned, breathing cold that tasted metallic. Aegon raised torch. Could this be volcanic vent? He asked. Or vault? Arya guessed, fingers resting on dagger hilt. Sansa stepped closer. Within the hollow lay a single shard of obsidian, shaped like a 7-pointed star, slick and black. Around it, concentric etchings in the ice resembled runes, but none known to maesters. Bran, swathed in sable blankets, touched a rune, and whispered a single word in the true tongue of ancient weirwoods. The ice shimmered, then cleared like glass. They saw water beneath, lit by their lanterns, yet also, fainter than rumor, a shape deeper still, flickering as if mirrored, a city of towers and causeways buried under ice. Not ruin of men, but geometry too smooth, too elegant, as though poured from moonlight. Then the reflection vanished, replaced by darkness. Brienne muttered a prayer. Aegon crossed himself unconsciously. Sansa exhaled white vapor. Whatever sleeps there, we let it rest. Our task is not to awaken new empires, but to shield the living from old catastrophe. They recorded the site's coordinates, melted wax over the rune to dull its glimmer, and returned to the Dawnbreaker with more questions than answers, yet convinced the land's fever ran deeper than any commerce or creed. On the voyage back, they drafted the Far North Stewardship Act, establishing a protected corridor from Skagos to the last ice shelf, forbidding mining, drilling, or relic excavation without 2/3 Senate approval and Free Folk Council consent. It would be the realm's first environmental covenant. When the act passed, after fierce debate where wealthy investors barked of lost jade deposits, Sansa finally felt a sliver of contentment settle into her bones. She retired once more to Winterfell's orchard, entrusted executive duties to Yara and Speaker Mela, and devoted afternoons to teaching local children letter games among apple trees. She penned essays titled On Weaving, on Pruning, on Hearing Snow. Scholars published them, printers gilded their edges, but she shrugged. They were only reminders to herself not to lose softness to steel. Seasons cycled. Bran traveled farther in dreams until one spring he did not wake. His body rested beneath the heart tree he had loved. Ravens clustered there for 7 days, as though paying tribute. At his funeral, the Free Folk Thanes presented Sansa with a staff carved of glacier oak, its tip banded by silver rings etched with their clan's symbols. She accepted it, tears freezing on her lashes, and swore to carry forward her brother's quiet vigilance. On the 10th anniversary of the Charter of Harrenhal, Bells rang from Tarth to Torrhen Square. No throne had re-emerged. No monarch had claimed destiny. Children born after the War of the Five Kings thought dragons merely old wives' tales for bedtime. They read printed pamphlets about tides, civic oaths, and fishery quotas. They practiced debating in schoolyards. Some still fought, lied, stole. Humanity endured. Yet when the rains flooded dikes at Thistleton, farmers sent railgrams in 6 provinces, dispatched sandbags within 2 days. That coordination, more than any anthem, testified to the Republic's beating heart. Sansa, hair silver now, walked the reconstructed streets of King's Landing one dusk, unnoticed beneath a homespun shawl. Street vendors hawked blackberry tarts and iced oat milk. Under sputtering arc lamps, 2 students from Sunspear argued politely in front of a public news stall over whether canal tolls should subsidize desert wind farms. They referenced assembly minutes without stumbling. She smiled, unannounced, and slipped a copper stag into the busker's cup beside them. Heading up Rampart Row, he paused before a statue near the shell of the sept, once rubble, now sculpted into a garden of remembrance. The statue showed a farmer handing a loaf to a mason, who in turn passed a stone to a shipwright, forming a circle. Children chased each other through its archway. An inscription ran along its base. From hand to hand, the realm is built. No crown but kindness shall rest upon our brows. She traced the letters, felt their grooves. Somewhere distant, rails clanged, ships hooted, papers rustled, flames smelted ore, songs drifted from a theater where orphans performed a play called The Broken Wheel. Somewhere north, snow fell silent on the Dawnbreaker's moored bow, where free folk scientists dipped prisms into meltwater and wrote numbers by lamplight. Somewhere south, Yara addressed a Senate hall filled with accents from half the world, translating a summer islander's petition about fair citrus trade. Sansa turned away, heart heavy and light at once. She understood at last Bran's mantra, the weft phrase, because it is always pulled forward, weaving new color into old cloth. Let it fray, as long as more hands keep knotting the strands. She walked downhill toward the harbor, where lanterns danced on black waves and gulls cried overhead. And in her step there was no haste, no fear, only the quiet certainty that while storms would come and frost would kill, and men would plot, so too would singers invent ballads and children learn letters and neighbors share bread. The Republic was fragile, yes, so was every heartbeat. Yet fragile things endured when cherished. And there were more guardians now than she could name. At the pier, she met a boy mending nets, his cheeks smeared with tar. He asked if she needed passage. She said only a moment of the sea's breath. They stood side by side, listening to hulls creak, to distant boilers chugging. Stars spread like scattered grain across night's field. Sansa inhaled briny wind and felt the tapestry inside her pulse. She would board a train tomorrow, attend another committee, draft another compromise. She would write to Etta Orland's daughter about prosthetic designs, send saplings from Winterfell's orchard to experimental greenhouses on the shivering coast. Work never ended, and that was well. Dawn would come. The cloth would pull forward again. For now, she simply watched the water move beneath lantern glow, every wave a small voice repeating the same vow in rolling cadence. We move, we mend, we rise. Her lips shaped the words in silent chorus. And overhead, a gull wheeled, catching lamplight on its wings like a scrap of woven silver, before vanishing into the dark that, however deep, could never again be wholly without song.